Good evening. I'll call to order this October 15th, 2024 Fairfield Plan and Zoning Commission special meeting. Let's dive right into our item, Plan of Conservation Development, POCD. Mr. Went, I know you had some comments. Start us off.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jim Wendt. I'm the planning director for the town of Fairfield, and joining me tonight in the presentation is Emmeline Harrigan, assistant planning director. Thank you for being here and your interest. We see a lot of familiar faces. Some of you have been with us on this journey from the beginning. Some of you may be joining us midstream, but nevertheless, thank you for your interest tonight. I'm going to do some introductory remarks and some additional comments, and then Emmeline is going to do a brief presentation on the structure of the plans and its highlights, after which the commission is going to welcome your comment. We're here for public feedback. We've done a lot of discussion amongst the commission since the various drafts have been released, and we are pleased to be at the point where we are now soliciting additional public feedback. So, as stated in the opening paragraph of the document, and I hope you've had a chance to look at it, it's been posted for a while. POCD, Plan of Conservation and Development, is the articulation of priorities for public and private investment in our town for the next 10 years or so. This has been a collaborative effort with robust public engagement, building not only on previous planning work by this commission, but the plan supports also previous work of other agencies in the town, including but not limited to the Affordable Housing Plan, the MetroCog Regional Plan, the Sustainability Plan, Strategic Plan, Economic Development Plan, among others enumerated in our plan document. Our public engagement culminated last April when we had an open house meeting where ourselves and our consultants presented feedback from the findings of our previous engagement and outlined some of the, or all of actually the strategies that we had in this document, and folks were allowed to engage and vote on those, and that we got largely positive feedback from that, which supported our recommendations that we have in this plan. We did post an initial draft of the POCD in July of last year. Since that initial draft, we have worked to address the feedback we received at that time. We've included the addition of an executive summary. We've reworked some of the chapters to make the plan more cohesive in our view. We had an election, obviously, in 2023 that brought about change within the commission membership itself. This led to some additional dialogue with the commission on the formation of the plan, and we released a second draft in February of this year, followed by additional conversation that we've had with the commission that leads us to our current draft dated August the 19th. So this plan represents targeted strategies for housing opportunities, including further advancing the recommendations of the Affordable Housing Plan, as well as targeted economic development opportunities near transit and in our downtown. This plan does not propose wholesale change throughout the town, and the draft specifically recognizes that. Specifically on page 27 in the introductory chapter of the Sustainably Prosperous Community, the plan quotes, "Many Fairfielders strongly connect the quality of town with the quality of its residential neighborhoods. As such, there is little opportunity or appetite to grow its economy through expansion of its commercial and industrial areas. Thus, economic growth will be driven by adapted reuse and redevelopment." That's what we're seeing by and large in our commercial corridors, not brand new sites that have never been built upon before, but reuse of primarily older industrial sites. The development goals and strategies complement and support the transit-oriented development work that this commission has undertaken for the past 5 years. In essence, targeted development in predominantly commercial locations to help increase the grand list while maintaining the underlying characteristics of our legacy neighborhoods. The narrative, the way this plan is structured, there's a narrative in each chapter that provides the underpinning for each of the sections. And then the recommendations and strategies are what we refer to as the blue pages, literally blue, at the end of each chapter. The recommendations are reflective of the public input that we've received along the way. I want to emphasize that adoption of this plan does not implement any of its recommendations. Implementation comes later in affirmative action steps that have to be taken once the plan is adopted. So this plan makes essentially there are three main thrusts to this plan. One is there are recommendations for changes in our regulatory structure, which are found in our zoning regulations and zoning map. The plan also identifies priorities for additional planning work that we want to consider undertaking in the near term. And third, the plan highlights priorities of other agencies within the town to assist in potential grant funding opportunities to achieve those goals. The second component of the funding that we received to undertake this or finish this project, I should say, is for a complete reorganization of our zoning regulations. That is on deck. We are anxious to move on to that phase, but that comes naturally after adoption of this plan. So we're looking to get feedback, have continued conversation, and ultimately after plan adoption, we will move into the phase of reorganizing and rewriting the zoning regulations. Before I get into, or Emmeline gets into her presentation, I just want to jump to an area of concern that always comes up when we talk about housing opportunities, and that's the tension within the community with respect to school enrollment and what does that mean with respect to housing opportunities in school enrollment. So, we are not advancing here.
That's right. There we go. Went to sleep.
So I want to emphasize the collaboration. The Board of Ed has a 10-year enrollment projection. Its most recent 10-year enrollment projection study is dated 2022 and shows and projects a modest decline in overall enrollment, rebounding to the present enrollment in around 2032. Despite that, we know there's certain capacity issues at some elementary schools and enrollment may show a modest increase there. But I want to emphasize that the Board of Ed in our office and commission communicates in that plan. These are pages from that enrollment study. But I want to emphasize, and I know some of this text is difficult for you to read, but the point of these two slides is to show that any significant residential development, either on the drawing board or even a whisper in the wind, has been considered, is included in the Board of Ed's enrollment projections. So they are taking, as they should, and they do a very good job of being conservative in their projections, looking forward as to what may be on the horizon. In their enrollment study is reflective of potential future housing. The other thing I wanted to show, and this is not a Fairfield graph, but it's a state enrollment. If you put Fairfield's numbers on here, it would be very similar. That enrollment is not a linear thing. It comes in waves, literally. This is state enrollment history from the 70s through the mid 2000s. And Fairfield's experience essentially over the last 50 years has been pretty similar. I know there's a lot of numbers here, but what I want to emphasize here is that over the last 50 years, the total population in Fairfield has increased by 8.9% from 1970 to the present, or 2020, I should say. Total housing units have increased by 27.6% over that 50-year period. And during that same time, total enrollment has decreased by 20.9%. And largely, I think, in fact, due to enrollment per housing unit, has decreased by 38% over that same period. So there's fewer enrolled students per housing unit than there used to be. And the fact of the matter is more than 70% of all of our housing stock was built prior to 1970. So the driver of enrollment change is not construction of new larger scale rental housing or larger scale rental housing of any type. Again, a lot of numbers here, but just wanting to show that we do track with the Board of Ed where students are. And this is the list of all residential developments in the town with 10 or more dwelling units, excuse me. So we've been tracking this over several years to see what the impact actually is. And the impact for enrollment for larger scale residential development is 0.13 students per unit versus the overall enrollment per housing unit at 0.44 town-wide. So the other thing I wanted to say that comes up in this conversation a lot is a conservative projection over the lifespan of this plan, 10 years, would indicate that between 8,000 and 10,000 existing homes are going to change hands in that 10-year period, roughly a little less, on average, about 1,000 per year. The demographics of those households, over which no agency in the town has control, will have a much greater impact on enrollment than the total impact of any new units that may come online in that same period, projecting roughly 100 per year or 1,000 total, a tenfold difference in the impact of the turnover of existing housing stock versus new construction. That doesn't mean that new housing stock doesn't have any impact. It's just fractional compared to the turnover of existing housing stock. And again, this is reflected. The Board of Ed has recently produced and adopted their 10-year facilities plan. This was adopted in June of this year, recently, 3 months ago. And it highlights their priorities for the next 10 years for capital planning purposes. And with respect to elementary school facility needs, that facility plan identifies Dwight School for potential substantial renovation or building replacement, and Jennings School for an addition to replace a boardable classroom, in Osborne Hill for an addition to enclose or connect the main dwelling to, or the main school building to their annex. There's no other large scale addition or space needs identified in the Board of Ed's recently adopted facilities plan. Lastly, I know there's a lot of tension in the community with respect to racial imbalance. We share the Board of Ed's frustration with that topic. The law on racial imbalance creates a paradox, in my opinion, in that in order to meet the definition of being racially imbalanced, you first need to have a significant minority population. Communities that have very little or no minority population are never going to be considered imbalanced, even though by their lack of diversity, they're far more racially imbalanced than a town like Fairfield. We have an obligation under state law to promote housing for all populations. It continues to be the public policy of the state to promote development where public investment has already been made in transit and sewer infrastructure. Our own planning is consistent with this philosophy. So while on the one hand, housing and racial diversity continue to be priorities, the metric of racial imbalance penalizes communities that have significant supplies of varying housing types and densities that give rise to growing minority populations. My last slide, I hope. Fairfield's minority enrollment has increased from 20.7% in 2015 to 25.5% in the 2019-2020 school year. That's a 4.9% increase. That 4.9% increase in actual number is 23.7% growth of minority population in our schools over 5 years. McKinley School, of course, continues to be the most racially balanced school. But the good news is, if you can read this graphic on the far right-hand column, there are 6 other schools experiencing a higher minority growth rate as a percentage of enrollment than McKinley is. That growth is not fast enough to satisfy racial imbalance metric as the state has it presently. But again, the conversation here is just really to emphasize, in our view, that it's really the demographics of existing housing stock and that turnover rather than new development that drives these issues. I know there's been a lot talked about and a lot of tension in the community with respect to those two issues, enrollment and racial imbalance. So I just wanted to share with you some of those numbers that this commission is familiar with. We've talked about them, and to emphasize that future housing has been well considered by the Board of Ed in their facilities in enrollment planning. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Emmeline, the overall presentation of the plan that we have posted. Thank you.
I'm just going to make one additional housekeeping comment. So we are at the fire training facility, and we were alerted today that they are going to be doing a controlled burn training exercise in the back. So if you start to smell smoke, we're at the fire training center. It's all okay. Okay. So just want to get into the POCD. Our last POCD, the comprehensive POCD, was done in 2000. There were additions done in 2016, which allowed us, which kind of met a time criteria that we needed to meet in order to have a plan that was updated within 10 years at the time. And we added bike and pedestrian master plan information, as well as new information from a transit-oriented development study, and as well as the MetroCog was updating their demographic information. So we did what I would call an addendum in 2016. Back in 2017, it was the desire of the Plan and Zoning Commission leadership at that time that we comprehensively look at updating the POCD. Since that comprehensive update in 2000, there's been a few changes within state statute which dictate what has to be included in the POCD, including sewer service map areas, target development areas with existing infrastructure, mixed use and TOD, agriculture protection and preservation, sea level rise consideration, housing for aging populations, and technology infrastructure. In addition, there were also process changes that were mandated given the change in what is now commonplace, such as posting the plan on the website, local legislative review requirements, regional COG review requirements. But the big item that was updated in the statute is if you don't update your POCD every 10 years and your POCD is older than 10 years, you are no longer eligible for discretionary funding via state grant programs through the state of Connecticut. So we get a lot of funding for different programs, whether it's for road improvement projects, pedestrian connectivity projects, open space funding, trails grant funding. So it's really important that we keep our POCD not only within that 10-year requirement, but also up to date to, I think, the changing needs of our constituency and our population. As Jim mentioned, the plan uses a lot of existing planning work that the town has done through its various agencies, boards, and commissions, including the Bike and Ped Master Plan, our regional planning organization, MetroCog, their comprehensive plan, our flood mitigation plan, transit-oriented development study, resiliency planning, sustainability planning, our affordable housing plan, as well as the recently adopted Parks and Recreation plan. Our POCD draft has 6 themes that are carried through the document. These include a community that is home to all, a sustainably prosperous community, an interconnected community, a community where people come together, an environmentally rooted community, and a resilient community. Some of these vision statements or themes are very intertwined, and you'll see that as we get into some of the goals and policies identified in what Jim mentioned are the blue pages of the document. In a community that is home for all, this really mirrors, I think, a lot of the really great work that the Affordable Housing Committee has done. I think that for Fairfield, diversifying housing options in strategic locations is really important to meet the very different needs of our different households. Maintain historic districts and legacy neighborhoods. Promote housing near transit facilities by adopting the TOD study recommendations that were adopted in 2019. Increase the supply of affordable housing. Reduce density in the FEMA floodway where it's really highly hazardous. Reduce parking requirements to reduce unnecessary burden on the construction of residential units, in particular, kind of middle density residential developments. Bring residential zoning in compliance with state statutes. For a sustainably prosperous community, This is really the town's economic development chapter, as it were. And as Jim mentioned, it's not the intention of the community overall to increase where our commercial districts are located, but really be sensitive about infill within those commercial districts themselves. There are a few small exceptions, one of which is currently we have the bus depot area near the former GE Sacred Heart West campus that's not being utilized. And so we think it's prudent to conduct some sort of study that looks at, whether there's a better use for that area now that it's not used for its prior purpose. Office overlay for home-based businesses. The former Exide battery plant is now proposed for use, so we aren't going to really focus on that as much. The Fairfield Black Rock Station area has been targeted and has been recently the location for a lot of new development. But we are hoping to kind of take that a step further by also looking at increased walkability, better multimodal connections. And then, of course, to continue to coordinate the impact of the increased housing opportunities with the Board of Ed facilities planning folks. We want to encourage redevelopment and infill development in existing commercial districts. Part of that is very specific to the zoning regulations and re-examining some of our regulations and standards for commercial zones for mixed use projects, including ground floor commercial standards, pedestrian friendly design requirements, upper level setbacks to help reduce the massing for the building itself. And we do think that there's going to be an increased focus on Black Rock Turnpike and Kings Highway. So we'd like to study those areas more comprehensively as well. We also think that in multi-tenant commercial plazas, we do need to revise our parking standards to allow for more tenant flexibility so that when tenants switch within those lease spaces, that there's not as many trips to the Zoning Board of Appeals, for example, that we have more administrative flexibility to ensure that those plazas continue to be vital. An interconnected community is really about how Fairfielders connect to places through their transportation options. And so strategy A is to build a transportation network that supports the needs of all users. That includes advancing the bike ped master plan, advancing complete streets regulations, coordinating greenway opportunities, perhaps things that are exclusive to walkers and bikers, and also to study alternative solutions, including microtransit. We do need to address roadway safety in our critical roadways and intersections, including safety studies for downtown and other portions of the Post Road Route 1. We have done a couple of safety studies, including the Black Rock Turnpike Safety Study and the Post Road Circle Safety Study. And we think that pursuing the recommendations of those plans should be a priority to ensure that those get implemented. We also want to study urban streetscape improvements for the Fairfield Black Rock Station area, where we are adding a lot of multifamily housing developments, and also to continue to pursue sidewalk connectivity through additional study. We also want to pursue funding to improve multimodal access under the railroad underpasses, which, as I think Fairfielders have told us, are really an issue in terms of our north-south connectivity within Fairfield. And a community where people come together is about our community places and spaces. Strategy A really advances the recommendations of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So building new athletic fields and improving existing ones per the very detailed work that was done as part of that plan. Repairing and updating playgrounds, enhancing parking, ADA access, pathways to parks, as well as they identified study opportunities for indoor gym and pool spaces, which I think was also within our last plan, seems to be a recurring theme. We also would love to study the future acquisition of the Turner Reserve. That has been targeted to be turned over to the town from the federal government as a future recreation site. But the town has not yet pursued any kind of study to really figure out how viable that might be given the space, the topography, the area. So that's a future goal. We also want to integrate placemaking within our roadway projects, and that speaks to, again, not just complete streets, but also making places where Fairfielders can be comfortable in terms of making sure that we have very comprehensive street tree standards, street furniture, and the potential for public art as well as pocket parks. And we've had a few pocket parks just recently be added to the downtown area. So if you think of that as a model for what we'd like to see more of. Undertake placemaking studies for downtown and the Fairfield Black Rock Station area. Again, this is to make sure that these are places that are comfortable for walking and shopping. Those are two studies that we hope to do within the next 10-year time horizon. We also would like to study a townwide wayfinding signage program, something that's uniform for all of Fairfield. And then also with the newly created Art Commission to develop and promote artistic and cultural activities in Fairfield. The last two chapters, the next one is an environmentally rooted community. And one of the primary things, I'm not going to go through all of these, but one of the primary things that we'd like to do with our conservation department is to actually study, do an open space and conservation plan. I guess there hasn't been one that has been done. So I think that's an important step for our conservation department. And so identifying future open space properties that they'd like to pursue, as well as integrating, I think, greenways within that particular plan would be helpful for understanding where the priorities are for Fairfield moving forward with open space corridors and open space properties. So that kind of covers strategy A and B. Strategy C, protect beaches and coastal resources, restore tidal marshes and promote beach and dune restoration and Ash Creek restoration, ensure regular maintenance and replacement where needed of town tide gates, and explore dredging Pine Creek. Strategy D really looks to advance the recommendations from an action plan for a sustainable Fairfield, including water and energy conservation, dark sky initiatives, storm drainage and sewer improvements, pollinator pathway promotion, and impervious surface reduction. A resilient community is the last chapter, and that's really to focus investment in resilient hubs, to look at implementing the downtown Fairfield Green infrastructure study and other green infrastructure in town, to pursue the recommendations for the railroad underpass study to relieve some of the flooding that occurs there, prioritize protection of critical infrastructure, shelters and cooling centers, invest in resilient corridors. So study roadway elevations and adequate resilient corridors are available during and after natural disasters, and look for opportunities to maintain the low risk, resilient character in resilient neighborhoods. I think that one of the things that we'll have to look to do in the future is probably look at more greenway conversion of existing flood prone properties, understanding that those riverine sites will probably continue reliably into the future. And so acquisition is going to need to be part of, I think, what can be a co-benefit solution for the town, where it might allow for, as mentioned before, pedestrian and bike greenways, pollinator pathways, more naturalized riverine corridors, but also add green spaces that can provide flood storage. One of the strategies too with a warming climate was to look for tree canopy enhancement, both in the public right of way and in areas that don't conflict with existing infrastructure and utilities. Strategy D is to facilitate resilient choices in the individual and coordinated risk reduction areas. Our sea level rise resiliency plan includes maps that generally have overlapping individual and coordinated risk reduction areas. So some things that property owners can do on their own, some things that the town can coordinate with individual property owners, and also on behalf of public areas to reduce risk in our highly vulnerable areas. As a member of the National Flood Insurance Program, we also participate in the community rating system. And it's our hope to support individual projects such as elevations that meet or exceed town requirements so that we are more resilient moving forward in the future. I'm just going to go to the next one. And then the Flood Erosion Control Board is going to be updating their flood mitigation and resiliency plan. So we hope to identify the goals and policies that are identified in that plan as well. So as mentioned previously, not only do we rely on the Plan of Conservation and Development for grant funding through the state, but also federal funders look to our planning efforts in terms of supporting funding also through federal programs. So it's important that we make sure that we update the POCD because again, we'll be starting this process, hopefully if we adopt this soon, probably in another 7 years to reflect the needs and desires of the town at that time. As Jim mentioned, our next steps are really to update the zoning regulation. Right now, our zoning regulation is very narrative heavy. It doesn't include hardly any tables. There's a lot of different ways in which we can reorder the sections so that they make sense by zones that are related, visual clarity by adding tables. And then there's also state mandated updates that we're not quite up to date with. So we need to update those things. After we update the format of the zoning regulations, after that, we can really speak to content. Over the years, there's kind of a running list of things that I think our zoning enforcement staff would like us to update within our zoning regulations to help with their enforcement activities. There's things that we would like to update that are consistent with our TOD planning and some of the goals and vision statements that are within the POCD. But that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Harrigan.
Okay. Oops.
So Jim and Emmeline, thank you so much for your hard work. We still have a way to go. You guys I know have been working tirelessly behind the scenes. So thank you so much for your professionalism, your input, and all your help. Go ahead.
Appreciate that. I'm just going to switch the camera view so folks that wish to make comment can be comfortable there at the table at the normal presentation.
So very informative introduction. Thank you again. As we said, we still have a way to go, but I think that was a great summary of kind of where we have been and where we are. We will open it up to public comments. So normally it's a first come, first served basis. Obviously nobody, please, let's not have a stampede to the table here. But if you, one at a time, we're gonna be here, we have 3 hours up until 10 o'clock is our curfew. This is not your first and only time to be heard. Either we get through everybody or we don't, and then we have another session. So this isn't the first and only time you'll have a chance. If you decide, you can certainly have, we'll keep public comment open if you want to submit something by email. That's certainly a way to go as well. But why don't we just start kind of one at a time? If you can just give your name and your address. And yeah, yes, Kat.
Clarifying question.
Sure.
As far as public comment or keeping it open,
Sorry.
Is this listening to me?
I don't know, but hold on 1 second. We just have a quick question from Commissioner Braun. So go ahead.
okay, so as far as, could you explain where we are in the process? Because my understanding is this is not a statutorily mandated public hearing. This is simply a chance for public input. So is there any reason we would close public comment? I mean, I'm anticipating getting input from other entities as well. Like I know conservation, harbor management have formed subcommittees, and I don't think we've gotten input from them yet. So I don't understand why we would close public comment if we're still, this is sort of another draft that we're looking at, in other words. This is not
I
something
agree
we
with
have.
that. I'm just saying that,
Okay,
at some point, this session, public comment session, I'm saying will be over. We're gonna listen to the public. See when we're done with that. Other people can have inputs. I suspect the commission's gonna have further comments and revisions, and then we can go forward from there.
okay.
But I can't keep it open indefinitely, obviously. We have to kind of finish this process and then move on to the next step of getting another draft.
I hear you. Just in terms of studying this draft, this is not the statutory public hearing. Okay, thanks.
That's my understanding. I mean,
Yeah, if
I
I
guess
jump
it
in.
could be, but I don't expect.
Again, it's a public hearing to get public feedback on this draft. We don't know what we're going to hear. I hope with a robust audience, we're going to hear lots of things. That's going to lead us to further conversation, I'm
Okay, thank
assuming,
you.
based on that.
That's what I wanted to
But in
understand.
terms of if folks don't have comments prepared tonight or can't be here or otherwise want to make comments after tonight, there's a portal that we've got at our TPZ at TPZ Commission at fairfieldct.org to present those comments. So the process going forward is going to be commission driven based on what we hear. So tonight is an opportunity for the public. We've had a lot of discussion. It's time for the public to present us some feedback to let us know where we go from here.
And we haven't discussed this draft yet, but I believe it incorporates a lot of the comments we've made in the past.
You've discussed this draft at length at
Well, we just got this in August. We haven't had a meeting to discuss.
we've had 4 meetings to discuss this draft before tonight.
I don't recall.
Our meetings earlier this year led to this draft.
That's factually inaccurate. Let me back up. We've had 7 meetings in all, but 4 meetings subsequent to the February draft. We've talked about this draft, but yes, based on the public comment we get tonight, we'll drive where you folks want to go. It's completely commission driven process.
Okay, and just to clarify again, the deadline to file the new POCD without losing state funding is November of 2026, because that's what the Office of Policy and Management shows. They show, we filed the current one we're working from in November of 2016. So we don't have like a deadline of next month to get this in there or anything.
We don't, but having said that, we've been working on this for
I
more than
understand.
5 years, and we would like to move on to updating the regulations. We've got private investment
Mhm.
that's moving faster than we are
Mhm.
in terms of advancing some of the recommendations we're making. So we'd like to be in the position to start implementing some of the things we've been talking about for a very long time now.
I mean, the answer to the question, if the public and everybody else gave us 100% approval tonight, which I'm not expecting.
Pardon me?
If the public and everybody else gave us 100% approval tonight, again, I'm not expecting, that's fine. We could, I guess, adopt it, but I don't expect that to happen.
We have to have a statutorily mandated public hearing with certain timeframes and deadlines.
I think we-
a public hearing.
I think that I
That's
guess the
what
point
this
is
is?
we've done that,
I didn't
yes.
realize that's what this was.
I think we've been clear that that's what it is and we will deal, but let's
Let's
move on to
just-
public comment. Sir, if you can just give your name and your address and the floor is yours. If you can just keep comments germane to the POCD.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fine. My name is Kenneth Camaro and I live at 345 Carroll Road. Opposite, I'm in the northwest corner of Fairfield U. I look upon the campus. And I would like to tell and thank Bill Gerber for paving my new road. I got 3 inches of asphalt all over that whole area. What a surprise. It's fantastic. I would like to begin by giving you guys a little bit of an idea in terms of what's going on in the real estate market. And I will say, listening to the introductory remarks, I'm here to represent what's going on with housing, whereas what she discussed was a whole spectrum of things, but I'm specifically focused on housing, and I'd like to report for you some of the things that have been going on in the Fairfield housing market. If we take a look from January in 2020 to September 2024, the homes for sale in Fairfield went from 544 to 135, 544 to 135. By the way, I gave copies of this stuff to Jim, okay? The closed sales in Fairfield were 879 in 2020 and 656 surprisingly in Fairfield. Now that's interesting because the sales are still sort of up, even though the inventory is way down. And what made that possible was that the days on market went from 72 days to 16. So we have rapid flow of when houses come on the market. And that is what's happening in Fairfield. I've got similar data here for the other things. Now, there's also another thing. The median sales price in 2020 was 550,000. It's now 850,000. So what we're talking about here, what we've just experienced was the absorption of the inventory because of the pandemic. It started in middle 2020 and went through 2021, 2022. We had an abnormal incursion of folks coming from the boroughs and so forth. But we've not recovered. We're at the inventory level, just to give you an idea, homes for sale are 25% of what they used to be. The median days on market are 24% of what they used to be. So we have got tremendous shifts in the market. The median sales price is up 54% in Fairfield. So we have all these things going on. And the bottom line is that we need some issues. Now I've got my little wish list here, so I'd like to go through that. I got my start in planning and zoning back in the McMansion and Stonewall ordinance days back in about 2006. The concerning then was that the big houses would change the streetscape. Well, they did. My wishes for the town are as follows: that the town become a lead the force town in developing new regulations that will enhance our housing plan and make it more in tune with the needs for families at the beginning, middle, and end of the family cycles. That means the first-time home buyers, the people who are upgrading from a small cape to a 4-bedroom colonial, and seniors who want to downsize to a comfortable place in Fairfield, not in Southbury, not in Newtown, but in Fairfield. We don't have those facilities. This means more multifamily condos, senior-friendly condos, Rowan townhouse style construction, and maybe a few high rises. I didn't see any conversation in her introductory remarks with regard to what I just said. We have a marvelous 100-year-old examples at Seaside Village in Bridgeport, and also the complex opposite Boston Commons in Bridgeport. These were just remarkable places in that they considered first-time home buyers, families with children and so forth. And they're marvelous little things, and they're not very big. 700, 800 square feet would be perfect for our first-time home buyers. But what's happening right now, all we're building is $1.2 to $2.5 million houses in an infill type of house. We don't seem to have any program to introduce what I'm going to call much wider spread development of affordable housing, but also housing that meets the spectrum of needs. Seniors need senior-friendly places. People who, we want to downsize from our 4-bedroom colonials to a nice condo that's senior-friendly. And I'm not the only person. There's other needs as well, too. Similar smallish upstairs and downstairs units of 700 to 800 square feet. First-time buyers don't have a lot of stuff. So you don't have to build places that are that big. They just don't have any stuff when they start out. And seniors want to stay in town and age in place. So Jim mentioned the other day that we've got a surplus of 2 people living in 4-bedroom colonials. Well, that's me. I'm a senior, and there's a major movement to age in place. So in a way, we're kind of slowing down the availability of those units, but we also don't have any place to go in Fairfield. We need to rethink our A zone sections and convert some to A/B zones and A to flex zones so that we can build new garden complexes, duplexes, fourplexes with 2024 architectural designs with parking nearby and maybe elevators. We need to be able to build lots of affordable small units that do not involve all the affordable housing issues and work to meet our housing ratio needs. Right now, we're only seeing $1.2 to $2.5 million new construction, all infill, all over town, whether it's the beach area, Fairfield, Stratfield, wherever there's a little cape or ranch that's little underdeveloped, it gets sucked up for $500,000 or $600,000, and you see a new unit going in the 1.2+ million. Nobody's building affordable units, okay? Any large apartments, and if we do go into any large apartment style buildings, we have to have built-in social spaces such as terraces and social rooms to help build community. I don't want to see an apartment building that's just parking and story after story of apartment with no place for people to actually have community activities. It's very important. And, and I think that's self-explanatory. We need front and backyards if we have these little garden apartment complexes, and basements when possible for all of the designs. Almost done here, folks. The commission, I would like to see the commission to embark on a project to reform an audit of presently undeveloped land that could be developed to some land that may have some wetlands on them for intelligent redesign that retains the conservation balance, which means you fill in this little wetlands area and you restore some wetlands either on that property or some other place in town. So it's a kind of like a conservation, what you call credit bank, okay? Some land that may have some wetlands for intelligent design and overbuilt parking lots and other non-residential parcels that would make great new garden apartment complexes. I bring to your attention the Stop and Shop parking lots. The one at the Circle, the one over on Villa Avenue. Those things are enormous. And we've got others that, it turns out the ShopRite is pretty well filled up, but the Stop and Shop lots are oversized. They're just never filled up. They don't even come close. And, there may be other land along the railroad right away. There may be land, other town land, private land. Last night for the time, this is the last idea. I would like to see the town invite architectural students from our top architectural schools, and we've got several in Connecticut, invite them to make a class project that studies the town and proposes new ways to build our housing. Let's see what they come up with. So I'd like to make that suggestion to you. It might be very interesting because if you take a look at Fairfield, I'm in real estate. I work for Caldwell Banker. I'm an active real estate agent. I will tell you one thing that most people have not said. With all of the new construction that's going on, Fairfield is becoming an even more affluent town. You can see this. When you sell a $1.5 or $2 million home, you're bringing in a family with a high family income. That's why we've got beautiful restaurants. And there's just tremendous pressure on Fairfield because it's so attractive. I have to compliment everybody who's ever been involved in developing the town. From a real estate standpoint, we've got a center shot in terms of what a community has got to have. But what we presently lack is a sensible housing plan that reflects the needs of each age group and each family type. You do not have it. You just simply don't have it. What we're dealing with is housing that was built in the 60s and 70s and 80s, rapid construction, on A-zone lots and so forth. But we don't really have, in my view, we don't have what I'm going to call a practical outlook in terms of meeting the needs of each family type. I want to thank you.
Great, thank you. No, I don't, not for this kind of hearing. Yes,
Oh,
sir.
lastly, I'm going to try to get a copy of this for you guys. This is a remarkable book that was put out by the National Association of Realtors. And it's like a textbook class in planning and zoning. It covers every issue. Affordable housing, how to get the community to adopt your new ideas, what towns around the country that are doing that are innovative. And I'm sure some of you are aware of some of these things, but this is just a remarkable document. I gave a copy to Jim and to Bill Gerber. I'm going to try to get copies for each of you and give them to Jim. So, and it's just, I'm just telling you, I've never seen anything like it in one document. There's 7 or 8 sections, each one talking about the history of planning and zoning and what things like Spokane are doing and where they're experimenting and so forth. I think you'll find each one of you will get a great idea that might still be incorporated in the plan.
Thank you for your
Thank you
time.
very much. top that.
I'm going to. Hello, everybody, and thanks for all your hard work. My name is Dina Cummings. I live at 600 Fairfield Beach Road. Been there for 32 years. And before that, rented on Fairfield Beach Road for 4 years before that. So almost 40 years here. Lots of changes. However, some of our zoning, since that's what we're planning on, maybe some zoning changes need some clarification and I think some updating due to the change in especially the beach district. As it stands now, Fairfield Beach Road has 2 sets of regulations for how many unrelated people may rent a home. The odd number houses and the peninsula are restricted to 4 unrelated persons. While even homes can have 5 unrelated people. My proposal is that all of Fairfield Beach Road conform to the same rule, 4 unrelated people. I'd really like 3, but that's pushing it, I'm sure. The reasons are, there's no difference between the needs of the homes on the water and the homes on the marsh side. Overpopulation, strain on emergency services, traffic, student life, which incorporates litter, noise, destruction. Also, the sewer department says that an average dwelling is 2.6 people, not 5. The quality of life as well as home values are negatively affected by stuffing in more students. This unequal rule that favors waterfront homes over marshside homes is long overdue for a change to meet the needs of residents in a fair manner. Because the housing prices have increased significantly, as the gentleman before me said, waterfront homes are less likely to rent to students as they were 30 years ago. So what's happening is the students have now come across the street to the even number houses. And I'm proposing that we have the same population regulation. There's no reason for having 5. If anyone can answer why one side of a street is 4 and one is 5, I'd love to hear it. It's the same road.
We're not gonna.
Right, but that's my question. It's the same place. And so that needs to be updated to reflect the change in the beach area to protect the people on the even side of the road. It also, as your POCD said, one of the goals is to reduce density in flood prone zones. Well, that's Fairfield Beach Road. So let's reduce the density. The other zoning regulation I would like to have clarified, I believe, is an accessory dwelling, which we are encouraging in the POCD. Is described by zoning as a dwelling that is part of a single family house. I propose clarification that all the people living at that single family house, one address, one mailbox, be counted, and that the ADU is not counted as a separate residence that can have maximum of 2 people, and then the main house have 5. For instance, I have 7 people living next to me who are renters because the accessory has 2, the main house has 5. I think ADUs were meant for a different reason, and I see a loophole in this ADU where I think it's a single family home. Otherwise, I mean, it's counted as it's being counted as a 2-family home pretty much, where one side gets a certain number and the other side's getting a certain number. The whole point of no 2-family homes on Fairfield Beach Road, but you can have accessory dwellings, that means that it's one dwelling, therefore should only have the 4 or 5 unrelated people, not 4 or 5 plus 2 more. So I would like to see it become one property, not broken up as a 2-family house, which it isn't. And also, as I said, ADUs, I think the intent of them is to help kids out of college who want to live kind of separate from their parents, elderly parents, so forth and so on. But to be able to rent these 2 sides and have 7 people unrelated, using the accessory dwelling as a loophole, I think is wrong. And the last point I'd like to make is that I want to thank conservation because since Tom Stanky's days, 30-something years ago, we've wanted to restore the marsh that runs from Vets Park to Fairfield Beach Road, Reef Road to Roland Road. During Hurricane Irene and Sandy, if you know, the elevation of the marsh in that area, which is acres and acres, is at 4.8 elevation. The beach across the street is at a higher elevation. So when the seawater comes over, it lands in the marsh and sits. Because our tidal gates have not been opened all the way, and because the town has not provided funding to cut down the invasive Phragmites so that the salt water can come in and kill them, they have to be cut down first by All Habitat. It's only about $4,000 to do it. What happens is flooding then happens on Roland, Reef, and Fairfield Beach because there's no place for the water to disperse. You got to open the tide gates so the water goes out with the tide and then comes back in and out and so forth. And it creates a healthy marsh. We get rid of the incredible fire hazard because in my 30 years, the Phragmites have grown from maybe 7 feet to probably 30 feet now. And they keep encroaching on everybody's yards. And it creates a huge fire hazard, as well as deer, mosquito, ticks, so forth and so on. If the marsh is restored and we become a really environmental friendly area, then you will get seabirds, you'll get sea life, you'll have beautiful low seagrass with little water canals going in. And as I said, it remediates flooding as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Dorothea Brennan, 1246 Fairfield Beach Road. And I don't know that it's appropriate for this forum, but in fact, it picks up. We're currently planning to dredge the lower parts of South Pine Creek down by South Pine Creek Road, and it needs to come up all the way to the Regional Fire Center because of all the reasons just listed. That I'll stop.
Good evening, my name is Michael Katz. I reside at 310 Autumn Ridge Road. Those of you who don't know, Autumn Ridge Road is in the eastern side of the Stratfield neighborhood. It caught my attention that the plan of conservation and development jumps to the retail use of the bus turnarounds on Eastern Turnpike. I wanted you to be aware that there's a tremendous amount of traffic congestion on Eastern Turnpike, which has gotten worse because of the population at Sacred Heart University. So I don't think you should be immediately jumping to the possibility of making more retail there. That's going to increase the congestion. You might want to use that space to, in essence, slow down the traffic on Eastern Turnpike by making it more wavy or something like that, rather than having retail there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody, my name is Sarah Roy and I live at 3 Buena Vista Road. I've lived in town since 2016. I did submit some comments via email. Thank you for the opportunity to do that. But one thing I forgot to mention, and Emmeline's presentation reminded me, there was a mention of the study of the Black Rock Turnpike. And I do think that was a very important study that was done several years ago. But when I was on the Bike and Pedestrian Committee in conversation with MetroCog, who led the charge with that study, I remember looking at the study and seeing a lack of bicycle facilities through the commercial part of that corridor with great concern. Megan Sloan at the time told me that this was many years ago, they did a public input survey and people didn't seem interested in having bicycle facilities on that part of Black Rock Turnpike, although there were some unprotected lanes, I believe, to the north. I encouraged her then, and I would encourage you now to revisit that because I think the culture has changed and there's a lot more interest in bicycle facilities for folks. I have a 14-year-old son, and he and his friends, one of their favorite things to do is go ride bikes up to Black Rock Turnpike. We live in Stratfield, and what the heck else are they gonna do, right? They're gonna go where there's practical destinations, and they don't drive. And they shouldn't have to drive there to feel safe to go there. It's a bus route for people who either can't drive or do not want to drive. And if you haven't yet, I'd encourage you to stand at a bus stop there and feel how hostile it feels to have the traffic rushing past you. It is a Strode. It is built for cars. I know there's a study to make it better, but I would just encourage you to revisit that study and update it to reflect the growing demand for safe bicycle infrastructure for that part of Black Rock Turnpike.
Thank you. Yes. Good evening.
My name is Becky Bunnell. I live at 2005 Fairfield Beach Road. I have lived in town since 2011. I'm also the chair of the Flood and Erosion Control Board, and until recently I was on the Fairfield Beach Residents Association, so some of my comments will
Could you
address.
speak up a little more?
Oh, I hear you. Yeah, how about if I do this? Does this,
Yes, thank you.
does this work? Okay. First of all, I want to thank the group that has done so much work on this plan. It's clear that a lot of work has gone into this. I'm glad to hear that you see this as just a draft and you're planning to do more work, because I do have a couple of suggestions that I think would make it even stronger. To me, this plan has done a lot of great work on the development side of a conservation and development plan. I'd like to see some more work on the conservation side, because I feel like the depth of suggestions and recommendations are very TOD oriented, and that's, I think, just because we've done more studies in that area. So since we have another year to work on, perhaps we could do a little bit more rigorous analysis of some of the more conservation things that are sort of mentioned here, but in passing. Expanding greenways, for example. I mean, what would that look like? How would that improve the quality of life for our residents? What would that actually be? So I'd love to see just a little more granularity on some of the many conservation items that are touched upon, but just touched upon, and just have that be part of the plan. Because to me, a plan of conservation and development needs to be balanced between the two. And right now it's very development heavy. So that's one thought. Another thought, and this comes from Flood and Erosion Control Board. I very much struggle with the concept of individual and coordinated risk reduction areas. The idea that one part of town would be able to get town funding and have coordinated projects, and other parts of town would be up to individual homeowners to do flood prevention projects, doesn't make sense to me, because both of the areas of town that are mentioned in the individual versus coordinated all have individual options and all have coordinated options. So why not just eliminate those two thoughts completely from the plan would be my recommendation, because it frankly feels discriminatory. And I don't really want to have our town have a plan that feels discriminatory, because as I said, there's individual projects and coordinated projects in all areas of town. The last thing I'd say, and I have lots of other comments. I mean, Sustainable Fairfield Task Force had 19 pages of suggestions, many of which you've incorporated, but I would encourage you to go back and look at their thoughts, because I think there were some really good thoughts in there. But the one I'll highlight is equity. I'm not sure we've really, we talk about affordable housing a lot, but an example to me of where we could go even deeper in that. Affordable housing to me has two components. It has actually the cost of the house, the annual or monthly cost to rent or buy, but it also has the monthly utility costs. So an affordable house that you may have a low purchase price, but has terrible building standards, terrible inefficiencies of heating and electricity, is very expensive for a family who doesn't have an extra $500 a month to pay for bad insulation and bad windows, causing their utility costs to go up. So I would encourage you guys to think about minimum building standards and building efficiency standards when you think about affordable housing. Because to me, affordable housing is the total picture. It's the monthly cost as well as the monthly carrying costs. And I have many other comments, but those are my main ones. Thanks for hearing me. Bye.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Alyssa Kent. I live at 186 White Oak Road. Thank you for the work that's been done so far on the POC and the opportunity to provide public comment. Just want to hit on a couple different things. I appreciated, Mr. Went, your overview on the current status of school enrollment, as well as racial equity and diversity in town and how it relates to the school. I think the commission knows that the racial imbalance law is on pause. Hopefully it gets funded for a review and for investigation, and hopefully they're looking to us to provide some of that interesting data that you had, Mr. Went, particularly in the datum between which schools are growing in racial structure and which are declining, and what that means and what the law could be revised to look at. I do encourage the commission to add back in the section on schools, just as a matter of course. I think it's important that we address that schools and development are uniquely intertwined, and schools make up a huge percentage of our town-owned properties, right? So it's really important that we just we collaborate and we know what's out there and what's coming our way and how they speak to each other. I would ask that the first thing the commission does, and I'll ask the same of the Board of Ed, is next year's meetings be coordinated. Actually, tonight is an important meeting over Board of Ed. I'm going to jump out to try and make it to that one after this. But if we cannot have them at the same time in the same month or the same weeks next year, that would be great. Sorry, that was outside of the POCD. So a couple other things. There was a really interesting study done by the Affordable Housing Committee or someone on the Affordable Housing Committee about parking in town. You know, I think that there's an opportunity for some of that language and information to be integrated into the POCD. I think most people in the commission may have seen it. If you haven't, get your hands on it. It's really kind of eye-opening. And then sort of lastly, want to talk about, you know, development and housing in particular. I appreciated the recommendations on density and parking revisions that I saw in the POCD. I thought they were really robust and headed in the right direction. I would say the next step is looking at architectural regs on top of that, really getting into the granular detail of how we make that density that's recommended and infill development really architecturally vibrant and interesting. Look at setbacks and height setbacks and things like that. And I think we have a huge opportunity in our town to really go to the next level on the architectural expression and vernacular that we see in our commercial areas. The other thing that I thought was really interesting coming out of the POCD was the data on the percentage of single family housing versus middle housing versus multifamily. And really it wasn't that surprising. I assume we all expect the number of multifamily to go up significantly between now and the next time we're looking at our POCD. But you know, I think there's a huge opportunity to see that number on middle housing going up as well. The state legislature passed House Bill 5474 in the spring. It did a couple of things to the 8-3 section of the legislation. One was that it added the ability to bring in middle housing as of right and accumulate housing unit equivalency points without necessarily having an affordable component to those. So that's just as of right middle housing, with the idea that you bring more middle housing into the equation and naturally you start to create more affordable housing without having to mandate a percentage of the housing as affordability. That's 1/4 of a point for each, 1/4 of an HUE point for each dwelling unit. But what I saw in the POCD is that we currently only have 35 parcels that are within the 12,500 square foot lot in a C zone. The B zone is a little more robust, but we really need to look at the requirements of B and C zone to try to make the most out of developing that middle housing and getting those HUE points towards our next moratorium. And there's a huge opportunity. Maybe there's other zones, maybe there's some A zones that can go down to B zones. And certainly we have a robust B zone that we could start to pick some streets that can go down to a C zone and really make use out of that HUE points that are now available to us. That House bill also dropped the percentage of HUE points down from 2% to 1.5% for municipalities of our size. So that's helpful, but it still requires that we have 317 points going into the next moratorium. I'm doubting myself right now, but I don't think there was a specific section on moratorium. And I think there needs to be, because it's sort of how you take all the ideas that are trying to come into play and how do we keep control of our local development? And that is being strategic and seeing how we get to our next moratorium and not being at the threat of having to wait for developers to come in and build our way through it. Let's be thoughtful. Let's think about how we can proactively build a more robust and sustainable, pocket of housing and really provide for what the gentleman that lives on Carroll Road was talking about. I've told this story to a few people. I moved to town 17 years ago on Roanoke Avenue, a duplex. I still own it. I rented to a empty nester. I'm going to keep it so my kids can boomerang there, and eventually I'll probably retire there. So really, we should have more opportunities for our residents to have the full life cycle of living in our town. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is, does everyone here? My name is Nina Fatahi. I live at 88 Overhill Road, which is one street parallel to the Post Road in an area that is discussed at length within the POCD. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. I definitely have issues with the education aspect, and I hope that we'll add that to this POCD. But what I want to focus on today is basically the development that's planned for the Post Road, starting at Sasko Hill Road, going all the way down to Mill Plain Road at Starbucks. From what I read, it sounds like the plans are to develop 5-story buildings on both the north side and the south side of the road. Today, we actually have a developer that wants to build a 50-foot building, which is outside of what is allowed today, right on the corner of Fairfield Place and the Post Road. It sounds like a great idea. I mean, we're talking about developing our town and increasing more accessible housing for empty nesters and perhaps people who are starting out. However, I think one thing that we're not really addressing is the impact that it has on the adjacent neighborhoods. So what we're doing is we're building a 4 to 5 story building adjacent to 2-story smaller sized homes with very little space in between that. Not only is it, strange to look at to see such a large building next to these small homes, but it also takes away a lot of the quality of life for people who live on those streets. We're talking about shadows, no sunlight. You can't get sunlight into your yard any longer because there's this looming building adjacent to you, lack of privacy. So with all these different stories of buildings with, let's say, 40 units, which is what's being proposed, all those people are going to have a purview directly into the homes, but also backyards, therefore changing the people who live in the surrounding area. We're already seeing people making drastic changes to move and to sell their homes because they see how damaging this will be to them. On top of that, we also have safety issues. This is an area, and when we talk about revision to parking standards, this is also something that will be impacting the neighbors and the entire area. What we're seeing is we already have major parking issues, and if you're not providing enough parking spots for the people who will be living and for the commercial spaces on the bottom floors, be it restaurants or offices or, retail spaces, those streets are all going to be, all those cars are going to be parked on the side streets, therefore reducing the sight lines for children playing in the streets, for people riding their bikes, for people driving around. Currently, we already have that issue. And if we have more cars on the street, that's also what we're going to be looking at. I also wanted to mention one thing that's really concerning is that we don't have a traffic study for this area. This is an area, as somebody who lives there, is constantly like bumper to bumper traffic. When I want to get off of Fairfield Place and turn right onto the Post Road, there's absolutely no way for me to do that without waiting a significant amount of time. So we're sitting, there's no way to turn left to go westbound into Westport. And if you wanted to go right, you've got to wait for a ton of cars to go through before you turn right. And with the upcoming road diet that the state is implementing, we don't have any idea of what that's really going to look like. And I'm worried that with the development and with not only this development, but if in fact the plans do go forward with developing both sides of the street equally, I'm wondering with such a narrow main artery into town, what our lifestyle, what our standard of life, and what basically our safety on the side roads is going to look like. So I'm really hoping that the town will fund a traffic study for this area, because I do think it's incredibly important. It's a great idea to build more housing and to create more, commercial buildings. However, if we don't have a place to park our cars and if we don't have a way to easily get in and out of those areas, it's going to deter people from spending time there. Another idea that I had is, one thing that I've noticed about Fairfield is that we don't have really like a look that, goes from one part of town into the other. We don't have we don't have commercial buildings that have a certain feel to them. Every architect comes around and decides to make their mark. For instance, we have Wensasco Hill, which is clapboard building. It does really flow into the neighborhood and it has a very New England downtown, look to it. But then we'll have really tall brick buildings that want to also be built about a block away from that. And then the next building that might be built will be another clapboard building. And I think that in order to make a really attractive and beautiful downtown, like for instance, Darien, we really need to have a vision and to say, this is what we want our downtown area to look like. And we should have the architects comply with that look rather than have piecemeal with different designs. Oops. Let me just check my notes really quick. Want to make sure I got everything. That's pretty much it. Oh, and committees. I hope we'll have some more committees to go through this. I know that everyone's been working incredibly hard on this, but I do think that there's a lot that needs to be looked at. This is a master plan for the next 10 years, and it's probably something that we don't want to rush into or take lightly. I appreciate all your time, and I hope that you'll put all these points into consideration.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Herb Limefuller, 83 Spruce Street. And while I'm the coordinating director of Fairfield Senior Advocates and also a member of the Affordable Housing Committee, this year's chair, I'm speaking on my own tonight. First, thanks to all of you and our staff for your great service to our town. Much appreciated. In short, I believe this document should effectively guide Fairfield development from a housing perspective for the near to intermediate term. It's been many years since any significant update has been made to the POCD, and this proposal to me seems to be long overdue. We face a severe housing challenge in town, needing both more budget-friendly housing and more housing options. Spikes in post-pandemic home prices and rents severely limit opportunities to live in Fairfield. They also limit the options of sellers who wish to remain in town. Despite a high Fairfield median income, we have a lot of economic diversity in town, with many people living on the economic margins. About 30% of us are house cost burdened. That is, they pay more than 30% of their incomes on housing-related costs, and renters are even more severely burdened. Last year, we had an age-friendly Fairfield survey. 1,000 people responded. More than 40% of those 1,000 individuals mentioned that these factors were really important to them. I should say that of the 1,000 respondents, all of those said that these were extremely important to them. A different home size that meets my needs, a community I can afford, a less costly lifestyle, and a home that helps me live independently as I age. I'll mention that the Age-Friendly Fairfield project is about much more than seniors. It's about all of us. That said, the POCD draft does note the significant and continuing growth of the senior population nationally. Fairfield Senior Advocates estimates the expected cost of losing a senior household to approach $10,000 a year. Now that's an annuity, $10,000 per year. So it makes sense we try to do all we can to retain our seniors for financial as well as for family and community reasons. And because many of our seniors aspire to age in place, supportive programs are a priority. Moreover, large numbers of seniors reside in two-story homes, and limited downsizing options are now available to them at all income and asset levels. The POCD draft acknowledges the need for more diversity in housing configurations, notably middle housing, which is typically 2, 3, 4 unit lots. It proposes a study to identify missing middle housing types and explore regulated additional density with appropriate design standards. I think this is much needed. The suggested rezoning of the 2 Post Road Kings Highway areas, one from Zone A to B and the other from Zone B to C, represent a conservative start. It really affects a very limited number of properties. Townwide, about 15% of our total housing units are in Zone B, with the eligibility for a duplex requiring a minimum of 9,000 square feet. Our Affordable Housing Committee undertook a review of Zone B properties recently, and it indicated that a reduced minimum size for a Zone B duplex lot could be workable. In fact, many of our Zone B properties that now have a duplex, about half of them, do not conform to the current 9,000 square foot minimum. Yet these deviations appear to well suit their neighborhoods. So I believe we should take a closer look at these minimum lot sizes for middle housing purposes. Now, we will soon qualify for a first moratorium from State Law 830G. Ironically, construction of existing 830G developments have helped to position us for moratorium status. That said, to keep a moratorium over the longer term, we'll need to develop other sources of housing points. Some encouragement, as a prior speaker mentioned, some encouragement now comes from the State General Assembly with a new law providing moratorium credit for middle housing, whether or not it's classified as affordable. Speaking of affordable, I hope we can all be careful not to portray affordable housing as some monster lurking at our doors. A household of 4 with an income of about 94,000 qualifies for some help. I don't think we want a Fairfield of all wealthy residents. And if not, we need to promote more education and constructive conversation about housing with our public. Other proposed POC actions to expand ADU eligibility, to codify transit-oriented district study recommendations, liberalize design residence district requirements, and modify design commercial district mixed use requirements would also help to diversify our housing stock. In addition to reducing parking requirements, for multifamily dwellings, for large retail and large commercial developments, we can encourage the repurposing of large underparked lots for better land use. Finally, on the suggested study of our transportation needs, a more interconnected community was the general sentiment of the Age-Friendly Fairfield survey. Respondents overwhelmingly cited as extremely important or very important reliable and affordable public transportation, special transportation services for people with disabilities and older adults, transportation at extended hours beyond those we currently experience, such as late afternoons and weekends, and a new form of transportation that might connect town areas, such as the circulator, between neighborhoods and activity centers. While we need to dig deeper on this, an evaluation of improvement options might benefit commuters, caregivers, seniors with disabilities, people with disabilities, and those who wish to reduce their dependency on personal vehicles.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Mary Boudreau, 285 Autumn Ridge Road. I'm here to talk about the idea of developing the bus turnaround, which one of my neighbors spoke about previously. There's several reasons I think it's a bad idea. One is the traffic and the speed on that stretch of road. So where the road sort of peaks where Sport Hill gas station is, and then it declines towards the west campus, the cars pick up speed. There's actually a marked crosswalk right by the Sport Hill gas station. You cannot cross the street hoping that someone will stop, because they don't stop. I've stood there flailing my hands and no one stops. And my sister was actually trying to make a left-hand turn into Sport Hill gas station, got rear-ended because of the speed on that road. So to think that there might be development when they even pick up speed going down the hill and cars coming in and out, I think that's a recipe for disaster. I also see a lot of the Sacred Heart kids jog on that stretch of road. So to add cars in and out when they're jogging there is also very dangerous. And for a small neighborhood, we're, Autumn Ridge Road, Spring Valley, Shady Brook, for that small neighborhood, we've dealt with a lot of development because we're sandwiched in between the Sacred Heart campus and the West campus. So, the way our houses sit on that height of Autumn Ridge, they built the ice hockey rink. Well, those lights just pour into my kitchen from October to May, all night long because of the height that we sit on that area. So to think now that we could have more development with more lights and more noise is really disheartening. So it asks you to, let's think about something else we could do there. We actually use it for a turnaround because when we come out of our street in the morning or, at 5 o'clock, you cannot make a left-hand turn onto Eastern Turnpike. So you have to make a right-hand turn, use the bus turnaround in order to go in the other direction. I think there's a lot of other things we can do. The plan talked about, biodiversity. We've lost so much green space with the development that's gone on with Sacred Heart. It'd be nice to, recapture some green space there, make a pollinator garden, come up with some other ideas that we could do there other than more commercial development for our small neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Katie Lawrence. I live on 6 Carlton Street. I came here just to listen, and so and everybody else is coming up here with notes and things to speak from. So this is just contemporaneously. I moved to Fairfield with my husband 47 years ago from Westport, buying our starter home. And then we were going to move back to Westport. And no, we didn't. We had 3 children. So we bought our basic cape. Had 3 children and 3 additions. So we did a dormer. Then we did a garage. And then we really thought we were going to have to move with the 3rd one. And then no, we added on again. But we live on a dead-end street, 8 houses. That was perfect for our children, walking distance to downtown, the library, all of that. This street, 3 out of those 8 houses are now McMansions. We all sit on a 1/4 acre. These houses are enormous, and there's another one being built, another house being torn down right now. It just feels like there's no real thought to integrity of neighborhoods, I can see these capes being added on to, but knocking a house down and building a $1.5 million house is I guess it's good for the developer. Also, out on Oldfield Road now, the traffic has gotten horrendous. It used to be Friday, it would back up from, Mona Terrace to Reef Road. Now it's every day, no matter what time of day. And another thing that I'm concerned with, and that's always been something that I've enjoyed about Westport and Fairfield, and I think Westport's losing it, but Fairfield is really losing it also, is the architectural integrity of our town. That
Yes.
you used to go to downtown and you'd see the brick and you could see how it flowed. And now you've got these abysmal things that are black standing up there by the train station. And it's okay, maybe people like that, but it doesn't fit in with the integrity of our town. And I go to other towns in Connecticut. I have a sister-in-law who lives in Glastonbury. You pull off the highway and the CVS fits into the integrity of the construction of the rest of their town. And I don't know why Fairfield can't enforce that kind of thing. Why can't we tell our architects, you have to fit in to what the history of our town is. Let's look at Town Hall. Let's look at the community theater and consider those items also. Okay, I guess that's it extemporaneously.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Paul Keblish. I'm at 58 Southgate Lane in Southport. First, thank you for the incredible effort to get this document together over a long period of time. My comments are just more, or suggestions are more general in nature. One is, where possible in this document, and if it's even relevant for this part of the process, to encourage innovation and innovative approaches to age-old problems and challenges, particularly with respect to public works. Two examples, one obvious, one less obvious. On the obvious side, something like burying utility lines and power lines when big areas, particularly in the downtown areas, are being redeveloped. Something that would encourage that, not mandate it necessarily, but encourage it, or certainly allow for it. The second, less obvious, something with respect to sewer systems. Much less sexy than housing and parks and beaches, but critical for all of that. Performance-based contracting for sewer system renewal. Something that is administratively very difficult right now, but would be very helpful for the town going forward, in situations where you can transfer the risk of spending a lot of money for things that you don't see. So encouraging innovation in solving age-old problems. The second suggestion, also related to sewer systems and capacity related issues, making more clear the link between the peak flow problems of sewer systems and the diversion and discharge issues and public beach closures. It's not very clear in the document. I think it should be more clear that that beach closures result from those diversions of sewer system flow that can't be treated due to, peak rain flows and everything relating to it. So the cost of sewer system inefficiency is actually very, very significant, particularly when you look at the coastal impacts and the environmental impacts. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am? Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Diane Kushner. I've been a resident of Fairfield for 25 years. Thank you for all of the work you've done. It looks really comprehensive. I have three things, just they're really questions. The first is when the apartment building went up by the train in downtown Fairfield, I came to understand that the need for firefighters went up by several. We needed more firemen because of the configuration of having to get into the hallway and then get into multiple units. So any building that is, high density kind of apartment style building is probably going to stress the needs of the fire department, and firemen or firefighters are expensive, and it's just something to consider. I don't know if that's something that you have considered, the incremental firemen need when you build something that's high density like that. The second is what I didn't see or hear in the plan is there a target population size for Fairfield, A? And B, is there a target composition of residential and commercial? And I say that because Fairfield is one of the biggest towns in Connecticut. It's basically a city, larger than us or New Britain. And then you go to Norwalk, Danbury, and then the cities, Bridgeport, Stanford, Waterbury, Hartford, New Haven. So, and when you grow to be a certain size, the composition, everything changes. Tax burdens, which is taxes as a percent of income, go up on people. Your community becomes a service town for other communities. As you know, Fairfield towns are funded by property tax revenue. But if you build enough commercial establishments, that's a magnet that draws people in from other places who are not paying property taxes. They're visiting establishments, they're paying sales taxes, that's going to the state, it's not coming back to the town. You have congestion, you have crime, you have a whole host of other issues. And I don't think that the people in Fairfield want to become that. So it might be nice to just hear about what is the target for, what is that composition of residential versus commercial. I do hear all the time people say, well, Westport gets a lot of its money from commercial establishments. Westport's very different. Westport's exempt property has no cost. It's a state park. Our exempt property has 16,000 people associated with it. That's my third point, is that everything I'm hearing is that housing is scarce. There's not enough housing. There's not enough life cycle housing. There's not enough affordable housing. We have 8% of people in this town competing for housing, and those are the students. Those are the seniors at Fairfield University, the seniors at Sacred Heart, and graduate students at those schools. Add up to approximately 5,000 people, that's 8,000 of the population, competing for the scarcest resource. This is all about that. This whole conversation tonight has been about our scarce resource. And that what's competing is when they leave then in the summer, then we have Airbnbs and we have rentals who are also not serving the population of Fairfield. So don't know what the solution is, but just something to think about. For me, that feels a little bit like the elephant in the room, that a big usage of our scarce housing is coming from non-tax paying property taxes, but generally the exempt property, which is a huge part of Fairfield, is a lot of our housing is servicing that. And by the way, those people who could be living on campus, Sacred Heart and Fairfield are among the least dense areas of the town. So even if they don't have enough beds today, they could build a dorm and that's where they could be living and making available the scarce housing for other people, for grandparents, for people to age in place or whatnot. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Clarissa.
With that, yeah, thank you.
Is that better?
It is, thank you.
Yes, my name is Clarissa Porter. I live at 37 Fairfield Place in Fairfield. I've owned my home in November. It will be 32 years. Prior to that, I lived in Southport, Connecticut. And as a child, I grew up for a number of years in Southport. So I've been around for a long time and I've seen a number of, very substantial changes to the area. I'm here tonight primarily because of the issue of extending the proposal to extend center designed business district mixed use developments down from, I guess, Thorpe Street down to past Sasko Hill. This is my neighborhood. I'm intimately familiar with it. I've seen the whole evolution from when there was a building on the Exide property to the enormous efforts to the cleanup and so forth. I'm also for years an organic gardener, no chemicals in my garden or yard. I do this because it is a pollinator garden, and I just want to jump around a little bit and it'll all tie together. I've kind of echo the concern of another woman here. There's a lot about development and there's some cursory talk about pollinators and green development, but with all due respect, it really seems like lip service to the green development. Pollinator gardens are a lot of work. A lot goes into preserving these incredibly necessary, delicate, and vulnerable creatures. Our environment depends on them. Our food sources depend on them. Yet certain chemicals can just wipe them out. It's wonderful to talk about having garden boxes and so forth. It's way more complicated than that. The way the plants are sourced. Are they sourced from a place that uses neonics? Are they, what are they fertilized with? If you put up lovely garden boxes with native plants and they are sourced from places that allow dangerous chemicals, what you're doing is you're luring these creatures to their death. It's totally counterproductive. So I mean, I don't know exactly how the committees and so forth work, but I think to talk about pollination and having corridors, there needs to be coordination about sourcing and maintenance, education for the developers that are going to use these plants. Also, as a property owner who may now be abutting one of these huge developments, I'm very concerned about what's going to happen to my garden, because if developers use certain additives and chemicals, those things leach into the soil. So again, I may lose my garden because it is irresponsible to lure delicate creatures there who will then imbibe nectar and pollen that will deteriorate them. It's just irresponsible. So there's the lip service is nice, but there's way more that goes into this. And I understand money is a huge temptation. Increasing the grand list is a huge temptation. But imagine a world 20 years from now when a child looks up at his parent and says, "Dad, what's a butterfly?" I mean, it's horrifying to think of it. And moving on, as I say, another concern I have in my neighborhood, because I'll be directly affected from this kind of extension of mixed use. I've heard people talk about privacy issues, having these huge buildings, looking right into your yards and all around. There goes your privacy, particularly if you have children. I would think it would be worrisome. The other thing is, I really am concerned about the lack of respect for any architectural integrity for those are lovely little residential pockets there. In my neighborhood, there's continuity of acquaintance. Children play in the street, people socialize, people walk their pets. The street is already extremely narrow. I have pages of pictures of current violations of parking law. I've discussed them with an engineer at the Department of Transportation. I have been told what specific state statutes on the post road those cars are violating. I have innumerable pictures of cars, trucks, and delivery vehicles parking where it explicitly says no parking. I've also had someone from the town of Fairfield measure the width of that street. It is very narrow. I just for the life of me cannot see how emergency vehicles, two-way traffic, people who live there are gonna be able to safely get in and out of particularly my street and other such narrow streets. And lastly, I want to talk about, to me, this, I'm new to all of this. I don't have a background in city planning, but I've been coming to these meetings now for several weeks. And this, what I hear going on strikes me as kind of demographic discrimination. Why is our neighborhood being loaded down when there are other districts where more, as people are talking about, more imaginative housing alternatives might be come up with? I mean, I simply can't believe the only way to ameliorate housing problems is to throw up these huge buildings willy-nilly without any respect for people like myself who have lived there for decades. And another point, and I will stop, is I am sort of flummoxed on page 36 of your POCD under sewer capacity. And I'll ask for your patience. It says, I'm reading verbatim from your document. It says the sewer capacity, the existing wastewater treatment facility has the capacity to treat approximately 9 million gallons of wastewater per day. Due to the advanced age of Fairfield sanitary sewer pipes and manholes, roughly 50% of the existing treatment flow is comprised of groundwater inflow and infiltration. System improvements such as pipes and manhole repairs and replacements are needed to reduce these increased flows and improve the overall capacity and sewer functionality. The targeted development opportunities within this section will result in increased grand list growth that benefits all residents of the town. This growth cannot be achieved without consideration of upgrading sewer infrastructure function. Priority funding, including property tax revenue, should be considered to achieve system repair upgrades, not only to allow additional development, but to decrease WWTF processing costs due to more efficient flow of the plant. Well, aren't you now putting more buildings along a place where there's city sewer that, again, I'm a layman, but it sounds like you already have some problems. So you're like building something on something that has a problem to get funding for the problem. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I will stop with one last point regarding my passion about these defenseless, innocent creatures that we as intelligent human beings have the responsibility, in my opinion, to protect. Pollinators, birds, their larvae, their caterpillars. They don't just need a box and a little corridor. They need lawn, they need grass. A lot of pollination happens on lawn level. If you just mow the place over with impervious surface, none of these creatures are gonna live very long, in my opinion. And thank you for tolerating my maybe slightly too poignant testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm Joseph Valesky. I live on Elm Street, which is one street north of I-95, and it is in between North Benson and Round Hill. So my family moved in 2005 when I was 4 years old, and I've pretty much lived in Fairfield my whole life. So I went to college and I've been back now for about 2 years. So I hope I represent a pretty unique, but also somewhat in that life cycle demographic. So kind of on that note, I get that it's very specific to my area, but I think that it's only mentioned briefly in the POCD, but really emphasizing development of actual complete sidewalks on North Benson and Round Hill would be critical, both for increasing pedestrian safety, but also reducing traffic. Because, for example, my street is actually easily within walking distance of many shops, stores, etc. on the Post Road. And somebody young and fit like myself, I would actually be totally fine with walking to those stores to do errands. But right now, there is no complete sidewalk on Round Hill. And then on North Benson, underneath the train underpass, the sidewalk gets kind of cut off right by North Benson, making it an exceptionally dangerous place to walk. In that same way, again, reducing all of that traffic. I'm also a little surprised that in the developments of increasing the commercial and residential areas near the Post Road, there actually isn't more talk of developing the area that's currently zoned as industrial between Walls Drive to the north and North Benson and Round Hill to the east and west respectively, because that area right now has, to my knowledge, 3 like commercial or industrial buildings that are somewhat occupied. I believe like HEIM Bearings is there. And that is an area that I imagine would be a lot more amenable to higher traffic load given its position along frontage road already like Walls Drive. And also the fact that, being honest, being on that north side of 95 and the first residential through street, we already have so much noise from I-95 that I doubt more apartments on the opposite side or other types of housing would have a major effect. And to the east, that's only bounded by the exit 22 northbound on-ramp. So there's no housing there. To the west, it's only bounded by Hillcrest, which is one street that's mostly a dead end and shielded from a lot of that, and across Round Hill itself. So my whole point is, if you even wanted, there's so much land there that's through that you could even build like a second frontage road on the south side to help facilitate traffic flow. And it's a pretty massive site, and kind of like the Stop and Shop parking lots. It's just a bunch of massive parking lots. And many times as I'm by that area constantly, I see few, if any, cars in the area. So it seems like a massively underutilized space, especially because if we want to increase the walkability and bikeability of that area, I feel like going linearly along the Post Road only makes it so that it's really hard to walk from one place to another, as everything becomes really far apart. Whereas if you try to expand onto those side streets where you can, it helps the average distance of different things become a lot closer to each other. It makes it significantly easier to walk and bike. Then on the conservation side of things, which I would certainly like to see more of as well, I personally am a pretty avid runner, and so I visit a lot of the open spaces all across town. Some of the biggest things that I've noticed, for example, in Perry's Mill Ponds, which I know they are talking about potentially having like another 2 acres on, there's one specific trail that's right by where the old dam was, that then goes south and parallels Sturgis Road, that has recently had a lack of maintenance, but I think it'd be great if it could be well maintained again, because that would take a lot of pedestrian traffic off of Sturgis Road and through an open space. So in addition to it just being beautiful, it would also be a lot safer. Additionally, in that area, Perry's Mill Ponds is an open space that spans 2 sides of the Mill River. And there currently is no easy way to get from one side to the other. And on the west side, there's a trail that runs north from the parking lot that then goes almost to a small dead end, I believe Twin Brooks Lane, that then at the very last second is cut off by a private property, has no trespassing, and then you have to go all the way back. Whereas if acquisition of at least like the river right of way of that property isn't possible, then just a wooden bridge across the Mill River to the trails on the eastern side of Perry's Mill Pond would be a great accessory in order to make that open space area flow more. Further north along the Mill River and kind of going along with the idea of a central greenway, something similar, at least in theory, to what the Trumbull Rail Trail has. I know as, again, as an avid runner, me and a lot of other people my age actually go to Trumbull specifically just for that rail trail because it's such a great resource. And that has like a one central gravel packed trail that then has a bunch of smaller, more natural trails off the side. I know there's a lot of Aquarion property right by the Mill River in the area where Mill Plain and Brookside intersect. If at all possible, developing a trail from that coming down towards Perry's Mill Pond would probably be a good idea. There's very little property in there. You could probably develop something like 2 to 3 miles long that would become a major asset for the town, and in theory could connect across Mill Plain Road to Springer Glen open space. Otherwise, I would say that a similar system could possibly be put in place along Pine Creek, which I think is one of the greatest assets we have now. I think south of Oldfield Road, it's relatively decent, although in theory, an east-west connector should exist. But along that northern side, there is the property at the end of Thorpe Street, which I know has various things that may or may not happen to it, but ideally a really large portion of that should be set aside for conservation because that is such an incredibly special ecosystem. And look at the incredible generosity that just happened in Norwalk with Manresa Island and the preservation of those coastal forests. We should really emphasize that because I feel like a lot of the spaces there are just marsh and then straight to houses. But if you could have a trail going from the base of that over to Rugby Park and then down along the western side, because there's already kind of a little bit of it going from Oldfield Road along the western side out to like a shack that kind of ends there. But if in theory you had a connector, that would basically get you a trail that could run all the way down from Pine Creek Avenue up to the Post Road, at least partially. Otherwise, I would say that in other spaces, development, especially by the Fairfield metro area, I run along the Ash Creek Conservation Trail a lot. I was kind of surprised to see like recently that there's that apartment building, which seems like it's going like smack dab in the middle of where the green space used to be. If in theory, you could have the same amount of development, but just push it closer to the roads, like as the plan said, maximum setbacks, that would help reduce remaining habitat fragmentation. And then also, what I would say as well is that developing or giving high priority to uncovering streams and developing those like live edges to help control flood mitigation would be great for the environment and probably bring about a lot of rare like freshwater marsh species as well that are good for pollinators. And also developing community gardens and spaces to get people sort of engaged with their natural world. I'll say, I think for a lot of people my age, I'm the only one here. There's not a lot of young people generally don't come to these things, but I think they should. And then, I mean, I'll also say, like, I guess I was probably even mistaken for a university student by some of you. So like, we should also like, there are young people in the town too. We exist.
Gen Z?
I guess you could say, yeah. But yeah, like I love the town. I care about it. And then on top of that, like, so for example, when I went to college a little while ago with those community gardens, you know, I went to Connecticut College in New London, and I was shocked that obviously that's an even more built up, it's a city, but like in every little space, there is a green space that they have that's like not more forested or a park, it's a community garden. I think that's awesome. Like, again, kind of specific to my area, but I bet it applies elsewhere. They have like the area where North Benson and the Post Road intersects. There's that long, like sort of triangular area where the like monument to Roger Ludlow is. And a lot of that's just grass. But in theory, if you had a actually safe sidewalk going up from there, and then it's like the university area and some reasonable, again, denser housing development on that northern side in between the train tracks and 95, and made that space a community garden, I think that could probably do pretty well, because then you'd have a bunch of people interested on the northern side who probably help the property values of those apartments. And then on the southern side, I get it's the post road, it's busy, but you just have to cross the post road and you could get there as well. So with that in mind, I'll sort of finish what I was saying. but you speak, yeah, okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Marie Malo, and I live at 62 Lindbergh Court. I've been a resident of Fairfield for the better part of 25 years. Lived, the vast majority of those years on the Stratfield section of town, and now I am on Lindbergh Court, which is off of South Pine Creek. What I want to address tonight is, as part of the POCD, there's a reference to changing the zoning in my area from design DCD to CDBD, right? Center Design Business District. The reference to creating, extending that Center Design Business District west toward Sasko Hill Road, which obviously directly impacts my neighborhood. I understand sort of the reason for it. I don't necessarily agree with it, obviously, because it will greatly impact the area in which I live and the neighbors and the neighborhood in my where I live on my street. But the question I have is, there is some reference to a traffic study. And I believe it's sort of toward the end of the POCD as a to-do item. My question is, in terms of timing, there was some discussion earlier in the meeting about, when exactly the POCD will be approved. Is it fast tracked and so forth and so on? I would like to see the traffic study done prior to the POCD being approved. And that just wasn't clear to me in the draft. I think we all know the traffic issue on this corridor of the Post Road, in this gateway into the center of town. It's absolutely untenable. It's been that way for many, many years. It's been that way since I've lived here in Fairfield for 25 years. But it's impacting me a lot more directly now that I live on this side of town. So my question is to timing of that traffic study. I would like to see that traffic study done before the POCD is approved. It's absolutely critical, especially given the development that's expected to be going into this area. Right now, we have the dealership, the Porsche dealership. There's another mixed-use development that's being proposed for my area. There's the road diet that's being contemplated. I get dizzy thinking about everything that's being contemplated for my area. And I just think a traffic study is absolutely critical to be done prior to the POCD being approved. The only other points I'll make are in terms of this corridor, with all the development that's being contemplated, I'm going to reiterate what a lot of other people said tonight about maintaining architectural integrity. I think that's absolutely critical, as well as the neighborhood integrity. There are a lot of, my street is one block from the Post Road, but everything that is contemplated in this area will impact just more than my street, which is one block. It's going to impact all of those surrounding neighborhoods that are off of South Pine Creek, as well as the area, east of Southport. There are a lot of neighborhoods and the traffic that this will generate, all of this change in this area, that it will generate will not only affect my particular neighborhood, which is one block, but it's going to impact all of the surrounding neighborhoods as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Heather Frank. I live at 72 Lindbergh, and I have been in town since 1994. Clarissa, Nina, and Marie are my neighbors. I am a block away from the Post Road and 5 houses away from the proposed new building on the Post Road between Fairfield Place and Lindbergh. I'm here, in good conscience, I couldn't walk out. I don't have notes. I wasn't planning on speaking, but in good conscience, I couldn't walk out without reiterating our concerns and my concerns since I've been in town and the development that I've seen. It's a lovely town. I love living here and paying the taxes and enjoying all that it has. I am concerned with putting new development within the town without thinking on a broader level. And I understand the growth is needed, but why can't we keep the architectural integrity of the town intact, like the people that came before spoke about, and demand, it's a rough word, but demand from the developers. It is our town. We are the residents. We are paying the taxes. That the growth that is part of this town and part of the forecast of going forward is also pleasing to the eye. And the development doesn't take away from what I have seen and why I moved to Fairfield in '94 going forward. Also, as Clarissa mentioned, the structure. How are we implementing new buildings on a corridor with that not only has traffic development issues, but infrastructure issues, as in sewer lines? I'm not for it, but I'm concerned that we will just overdevelop this area for no reason. And I know that there is good reason for growth, but why are we putting more stress on the residents that live in the area? The building that's proposed on the Post Road between Fairfield Place and Lindbergh, you've heard my neighbors say and talk about traffic study and the issues that will crop up from having a larger building abutting a developed neighborhood that's been there for years and years. I get that it's on the Post Road, but I'd like the town and the planning committee to also recognize we can't just go in and ignore the fringe of where these different buildings may be going up. And not consider who lives there, why we chose to live there, and the architecture of what may come in. It's just, I think it's really important to pay attention to those of us, wherever we live and wherever this new growth is happening, and how it impacts us as a whole, because we were here and we want to remain in the houses and the neighborhoods that we have already secured ourselves in and made friends with our neighbors. And if you don't know already, obviously we were in front of you for the whole dog issue. That community is really strong, and it's got strong tentacles that go out beyond the Overhill, Fairfield Place, Lindbergh area. And we want to keep that community in place, and putting a building of its size and even possibly raising the roof to 52 feet would really impact us. And I just really want to speak from the heart and have you understand that we are concerned, not only for what the extra apartment building would bring to the community, but the architecture of it too. And it shouldn't be an all-out war, but I really would hope that the town would want to work with our community, our neighborhood, and any other neighborhood that we plan on building, and look into how it would really impact all of us. I thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Mary Hoag. I live at 165 Stonewall Lane, and I am chair of the
Forestry Committee, and the Pollinator Pathway is under that. And I'm also secretary for the Sustainable Fairfield Group, which submitted the 19 pages that Ms. Bunnell referenced. And we were able to have a wonderful meeting with the planning staff about that. I think we would still like to see more conservation kinds of words at the front end of the document. It is all in there, it's just doesn't lead with it. And that is one concern I have. I would also like to bring up the idea of the Trust for Public Land has a program called 10-Minute Walk to a Park. And if we're going to be doing this development all over the place, we did that pocket park that on the 1720 Post Road at the Fairfield View property that was Ceruzzi. And we'd love to do more of those. Part of the problem is maintenance. It isn't easy to keep a pollinator garden going. You do need to have people help with that, so we need to figure that part out. But they don't have to be as big as that park. And so if we're developing throughout town, we need to make sure that there's green space in all those different places because we do want it to be livable. So we're doing placemaking, pocket parks, whatever term you want to give it, but we do need to have that green space everywhere. The other thing about conservation and development, I heard someone mention about filling in wetlands and I was a little scared. We need those. Those are our natural buffers for flooding. And it doesn't really matter if we fill in that one and fix another one. We need all of them and we need more of them. And it's really great that we're working on the tide gates and getting those fixed. And I know it's going to take some time and it's taking a lot of money, but it's really going to make a big difference and really protect our town. We need to worry about sea level rise, extreme weather events, resiliency, all that stuff. It's not just sea level rise, it's the rivers as well. And I know we're working on Rooster River and the other ones. So I just wanted to just reiterate that the sustainability group of committees in town are very actively trying to pay attention to this and work with the commission. I did send the 19-page thing to the commission that we already reviewed. I know the Conservation Commission had been with me and they had some lists of things too. And I'll just give a plug for lights out. Please turn your lights out between 11 and 6 because the birds are migrating over us tonight. There's going to be over 1 million every night or the next couple of days. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. My name is Frank Alunzi. I live at 102 Sasko Hill Road. I've been a resident of Fairfield since 2002. My wife and I have raised 2 daughters through public school, and we really love the neighborhood. I'm coming to speak about the expansion of the Center Design Business District down below Mill Plain Road down in Sasko.
Can you just speak up a little bit? Even I can't hear you.
Surely. Can you hear me now? Excellent. So I live in the neighborhood and, we've enjoyed the neighborhood in the 20+ years that we've lived. My wife and I walk with the kids down to the center of town. And I think, the town did a great job with the center district east of Mill Plain Road. It's beautiful. We enjoy going to the park. We enjoy going to the concerts. It looks beautiful when you go down there. Particularly when you go down there, the sidewalks are, 6-foot wide sidewalks. There's plenty of room to walk there. There's room for parking there. There's 2 lanes for traffic going in either direction. And there's a lot of traffic there. A couple of people have referred to the traffic study that we were looking for in terms of what's going on west of Mill Plain Road. And I didn't really see a lot of information. I had seen a couple of numbers about 13,000 to 16,000 cars a day that go across down that post road in that area. I tried to compare that and I looked online just to see in some, retail listings how much traffic was in the main part of Fairfield. And it looks like east of Mill Plain going towards the city center, it ranges between 19 and 24,000 cars a day. So it seems to me that if you're going to build a business district to the west of Mill Plain Road with the same density that you have in the town center, at least you should be able to plan for accommodating the same number of vehicles going down. That means that there's going to be about a 50 to 75% increase in cars going down that road. Now, if you're familiar with the road, obviously, at Mill Plain Road, it bottlenecks into a single lane going down until about Sasko Hill Road, where it opens up again. That road is, I walk it a lot with my kids. It's a dangerous road. It's kind of scary seeing the cars going back and forth, and there's a lot of traffic there. There's not a bike lane there. There's not really room for parking. When you go to Raleigh's or you go to, the hardware store or something, the parking going in and out of that gets very dangerous at times. If you're going to develop to the west of Mill Plain, I just would really like to see what the plan is in terms of widening the space, giving 6-foot, sidewalks so people have an opportunity to walk that, having areas to park on the side of the road so this way people aren't backing into traffic, making multiple ways of getting in and out of the town, whether you're riding a bike, whether you're walking, whether you're driving a car, and understanding that people are going to come if you build it. And so if you're building additional amenities down there, understanding how you're going to accommodate that. In addition, I'd like to see what the traffic study is, because I'm not sold on this whole idea of a traffic diet. By putting a choke point of a single lane of traffic there, people are still going to come to the area. And so if they can't go down that lane, they're going to go Old Field Road. They're going to come down South Pine Creek. They're going to come down South Hill Road. They're going to use the side streets because that's what people are going to do. I'd like to see what a traffic study looks like in terms of if we're contemplating what a traffic diet looks like, where are the other routes where these cars are going to go, and how is that going to affect the neighborhood communities? Because you have a lot of the neighborhood residents here, and they're very concerned. I have a 10-year-old. She walks to Taekwondo in the Fairfield Center there. My daughter just graduated from the high school. She used to go walk to and from the high school. And going down those side streets, whether you're going down North Pine Creek or you're going down Mill Plain, you're going underneath the train station, stuff like those sidewalks are not particularly safe. They're not the safest areas. And I really would like to see a plan of how do you make this town more walkable? How do you put time traffic lights so this way it's safe for our children to go walking around? And how do you deal with the increased traffic that's going to come if you have a business district that you're extending in? I haven't seen any of that plans. This is a tremendous plan. I read through it. There's a lot of work that went into that, but it's really thin when it comes to how are we going to be dealing with a lot of the traffic issues, the commercial and the safety of our kids there. So that's all I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi. My name is Matthew Halleck. I live on 6 Somerville Street, right over on the corner of Gould, right over there. For 30 years, I chased my wife up here from New York City and raised my kids, have a house right here. And the thing is, not to start off on a bad note, can y'all hear me? Like when I first moved here, they used to call Fairfield the town that has it all. They used to say it's the #1 town in the state. And people, huh?
It has no what?
They used to say this Fairfield is the town that has it all. It used to be, people used to say, this is the best town in the state. And it was on the cover of Money Magazine. Do you remember? Best towns in America. It's not on any lists anymore. We've dropped off all those lists. People don't say that anymore. They say bad things. We all know that. Fairfield's lost its charm. Fairfield's too crowded. It's all buildings now. Fairfield's toast. Whatever happened to Fairfield? They don't say good things. They really don't. And I think we all have to kind of take some blame for that. Really, it happened on our watch. It really did. But the thing is, I was down at Town Hall, and in the county clerk's office, there's a photo of Fairfield from 1779, from 250 years ago. And it's exactly the same photo. It's exactly the same town that it is now. It's pretty wild. Like if you look at it, all 4 rivers, Sasko, Mill River, Pine Creek, and the wetlands, and Ash Creek, the 5 miles of uninterrupted coastline, all the towns, were exactly the same. And I think that's kind of remarkable. It really is. You know, there's no development, there's no highways, there's no swamps that got drained, that we've retained all the qualities and neighborhoods of Fairfield after 250 years. And even like, if you look at the map, pull it up real quick. It has all the neighborhoods. It used to be, you know, we used to say Fairfield was built on, there's 7 hills. There's Sasko, Mill Hill, Greenfield Hill, Osborne, Round Hill, Toilsome Hill, and Holland Hill. Those are the 7 hills that are on the map. I used to say, because I had my office, I had the building on Tunxus Hill Road right over there, and I used to claim it was Tunxus just to be a cheerleader from the neighborhood, but it's really not. But going over there, and I really loved it over there. I love that neighborhood of Tunxus. It's very, very much underappreciated. The corner and the foot over there, down Moody and down those neighborhoods down there. And there's a neighborhood, there's stores you can walk to, there's people that are there. It's really, really cool over there. And it's always been neglected, especially Tunxus over there. That neighborhood, it's always thought about last. So I wanted to look at it really quick, and I made a video, but I was asked, I'll send it to you guys tomorrow because it's starting to get long and it's just too much going on. But I wanted to look and really embrace what makes Fairfield great. And it is nature, it's conservation, it's outdoors. I mean, I've been at all the meetings. I was at the meetings 2 years ago, and I saw everybody that's what everybody was talking about. Preserve outdoors, preserve the parks, preserve nature. You know, of course, single family homes and good schools and stuff and good neighborhoods and stuff, but it's what makes Fairfield Fairfield. We're blessed with that. We're lucky. No other reason we got lucky that we have an A+ landscape, the seascape. That's what people know it for. So we have to, by any means and stretch, hold on to that. So when you look at, and I wanted to just do a quick tour of Fairfield on that, and you start in Google Earth, and you look at it, you look down at, I saw it every day from my office on the corner of Fairfield, right down on Route 1 at the intersection there. That's a 6-corner intersection. It's the first, right when you cross Ash Creek from Bridgeport on Route 1. There's 6 corners. There's Moody, the foot of Tunxus Hill Road, the foot of 58, which is a state road, US 1, which is perhaps the most famous road in America, and then the entrance from the shopping center there. There's 6 corners. There's an accident there every single week. It's horrible. All right. And there's no sidewalk on 58 going down on Black Rock. There's no access to the open space there. That is beautiful open space back there behind everything on Ash Creek that winds behind 501 Kings Highway. And then it follows the river down there and opens up into Black Rock. That should all be active recreation with bike trails, path trails, canoes, kayaks, fishing. All that needs to be recaptured and reopened up. All that around Ash Creek is ignored. Same thing is true when you go into and then you go into Black Rock right there. What I'm recommending and what I'm suggesting is, like I said a couple of weeks ago, the mustard seed for Black Rock and what we're looking at was planted 25 years ago when Thomas Stanky was removed as the head of conservation. Metro told, even before Metro, a first selectman made a private deal with Metro to build that train station. There was no huge call for it. There was no public debate. It just happened. And the following first selectman, the Metro told him, they said, if you don't get rid of Thomas Stanky, we're taking you to court. And he was removed. And we are paying the price for that now. We do not have a strong independent conservative head of conservation with a budget and staff who can say, we don't have that at all. And we're paying the price for that with all this development. We need that strong advocate. We've never replaced it. So what I'm recommending is to protect our waterways permanently. We get federal recognition as a Long Island Sound wildlife natural refuge or a park or any sort of federal recognition like that. And we link up with other parks across the Sound. All right. My last name is Hallock, Hallock. Right across the Sound is Hallock State Park. My family goes back 400 years, right there on the North Fork out past Port Jeff. All right. We can connect up with them. Or Teddy Roosevelt's birthplace in Locust Hill out in by Oyster Bay on Long Island. Same thing. We can create maritime national wildlife refuge parks and protect our water right there and link up and do innovative studies to study the sound, to study the sand, to study the temperature and the differences and all those cool things, and really be a leader again in conservation and the environment. The same thing is true if you go down the beach then, so you start at Ash Creek, you go 5 miles down to the next spot, the river, which is Pine Creek. All right, and right here where we are, this entire stewardship of this is in the wrong department. The people that's not what they do well. This should all be under conservation and parks and rec, and it's not. And if you go back and you look over there, it's not managed well because that's not what they do well. All right, there's like the landfill, that should be a state park. Where I came from in Pelham and Westchester, City Island was a landfill. It's gorgeous. All right, that's a state park. And you go down and all the stewardship of all that down there, going down to the school at Mona Terrace. We've sacrificed the park there. All right, for the child's for the daycare centers there, they took over that entire park and they didn't pay for it. I looked at the lease. All right, they expanded into that entire park and they took it over all the way to Fairfield and they put all the way to Oldfield Road and they put up signs that say this is the park entrance. There's a sign, there's fencing along the Salt Marsh Trail there that shouldn't be there. That new equipment that went in there, they actually made it worse. I can't believe it. But there's like they put up more fences for that gym equipment. The basketball equipment you can't reach. The gates are all up over there. All that fencing, all those gates need to come down, and Oldfield Park should be restored to the public. Right. The same thing is true with the trail that goes up there, like the runner was just talking about. We can create nice trails, then cross the street to North Pine on the other side of Oldfield right there. That's a whole huge salt marsh. There's a gate in front of it. There's a big chain in front and blocks off that entire salt marsh to everybody. All right. And he was right. That salt marsh extends from here all the way up almost to Post Road, all the way up Thorpe. We can recover and reclaim all of that for everybody. Hundreds and hundreds of acres, if not thousands, all the way over here. And when you get up there when I say Thorpe too, I want to say one other thing. That was at the end of Thorpe, that was a lumber yard that was there that went up in a great conflagration in the middle of the night. All right. And let's remember what's in lumber. All right. There's arsenic, pressure treated lumber, formaldehyde, a lot of forever chemicals that was never tested, that was never tasted, all that right down there into the water. So all that needs to be tested and really preserved. Then what I recommend is creating a giant park with all that. We have all the way up to Mill River and recapture Mill River. Open up exit 20 to take a relief off of Mill River, off of exit 21. Open up at exit 20 right there. That comes right down to Sasco Road. So because exit 21 is backed up like crazy all the time now. And then you could create eco-hospitality, eco-tourism. People will flock in there to Martell's and stuff, create active recreation, trails, target shooting, go on up to Sturm Ruger where they are and have cool pellet guns and axe throwing and archery or whatever. Come all the way back down to the green spaces there now, punch tunnels through the train tracks, link up with the train station, create that Fairfield Park, create a giant park for people to see for there. Same thing is true on the Black Rock side, create that all Black Rock Park. All right, there was never a call for all those buildings over there on Black Rock, and there's not even a need for them. It was only, again, when Stenke was removed that there was no guardrails, and all of a sudden it was commercial development, commercial development, commercial development. There's no need for any of those buildings. There was never a call for them. The same thing is true. I just want to say a few other things before I take up everybody's time. When I look at the POCD, it's alarming. It really is. It's page after page of expanded development, higher density, changing the zoning. It almost seems like a premise for building. And I don't think we need it. And a lot of it is with the housing. And I understand all the great work and we all need housing. And this is something I told to the Affordable Housing Committee the other night. In my job, what I do, I work for I'm in electricity and energy, and my job was affordable housing. They're taking like an entire Caribbean island solar, electric, with agrivoltaics and solar farms and affordable housing. And I said, instead of affordable housing, why don't we take steel shipping containers, intermodal containers. I have a lot of experience in it, and they convert them into tiny living, they convert them into homes. And they put solar on top of them, and they love the whole thing. And we're making 20,000 of them, and the people own them as homes. And I'm saying the same thing here. We have affordable homes that we're offering to people that they can live in. It's not housing, it's not rental, you buy it. And there's no money down, there's no mortgage, there's no credit check. You just pay on a monthly fee what you think you can afford, right? And it's really, really cool. And it really is a solution to the housing problem. Anybody, a drug addict, a senior who's downsizing, a college student, whatever, anybody who's renting, you can buy one of these units. You can have 2 of them, 3 of them. You can make 1,500 square feet. They're gorgeous. And you build equity instead of renting. So we really feel it's really a solution to the problem. It builds homes. Anybody who's renting here in Fairfield, 2, 3, 4,000 people, here. You can have them. I'm not interested in making money for them. I'm really not. I'm interested in scaling. I really am. You know, it's like doubling a penny, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. I want to do like a lot. All right. There's 7 billion people in this world.
Is that a mobile home you're talking about?
It's called an intermodal container. The standard units are 8 feet wide by 20 feet long. They make double wides, double longs. So you can convert them. We can get them clean and delivered for $1,700. And that's virtually a home overnight. You could give it to somebody who's living under a bridge and say, here's a key and a lock, it's yours. And it might not mean much to you, but to them, it's everything. It really is. And we're in year 0 now. This is just pre-launch. We're not launching till next year, but we're talking to towns. We're trying to take orders, talking about different things that we can do with them. So, you know, community service and being a part of the community is a huge, huge part of the people who buy into it. And you are contractually bound to give back to your community and to improve your community. So if we did work with Fairfield and we had 2 people or 6 people, these are people who are invested and want to make their community better and work for your community and really make it good. So I'd like to send you that information. We really think it's a game changer. It could take that whole conversation of affordable homes, affordable housing. We call it homes because people are buying off the table. And anybody that wants one, here you go. I think that's, I want to say thank you. I didn't say thank you when I was here a couple weeks ago. I know this sounds cheesy. In ancient Rome, service to the state was like the most noble calling. It really was. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
And I guess that's it. The one thing I also want to say is with the historic districts, I did see there was a judge last week who ruled that in downtown Greenwich that they could create a special overlay for their own historic district, which is really cool. I want to take advantage of that. And I say we can create our own historic districts. I even look at all of Route 1 from Black Rock, from Ash Creek all the way down to Sasco is historic Route 1, downtown Fairfield, Southport, and many others. So I want to adopt that that historic overlay strategy the judge ruled. I also saw, the final thing was I saw in the POCD a lot of changes in a lot of the neighborhoods for allowing more buildings, more expansion, more zoning in all those neighborhoods. And I don't think it's appropriate to have any of that. And the final thing is we want to consider a thing that they call extended family zoning, which is members of the same family can build and expand on their property in their house, especially in a lot of cultures, not here in this culture as much, but a lot in Latin and South America and Asia, where you have large extended families. So we can create extended family zoning where you have a house and you have your brother and your family and your sister and your grandchildren, and you can expand that same house. And we can make that possible. And that could be a real alternative to multifamily housing. I guess that's it. Thank you. I'll send you the video tomorrow.
Good evening, everybody. I have a few comments that I don't know what the term, either minutia or errata.
Sir, can you just give your name and address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Dick Mahusky and I live on Colonial Drive.
Thank you.
A couple comments. Maybe think of something else. And I would categorize this as an architectural review board. Some of the comments about the look of the town and so forth. I'm not conversant with the entire plan. Maybe it's in there, maybe it's not, but things like having a setback on the upper story so buildings don't have this harsh slab sidedness. I like that. I mean, I think that's a good idea. That to me is what an architectural review board might have in their purview. And I know that this board has certainly commented to developers when they propose a project on, you know, some dormers would make it more New Englandish or something like that. So that's good. Dr. minutia. On page 49 of the plan, there is a map there which has community and educational facilities. And then on page 50, there's the key to that map. Some of these callouts are just wrong.
Thank you.
But yet it got out, it snuck by.
No,
you.
it's snuck by us. I know that it needs modification. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm also a member of the Flood and Erosion Control Board, and we currently have a request for an ordinance before the RTM. This goes back to 2021, where the state statutes changed the name of the Flood and Erosion Control Board to, and I have to read it, Flood Prevention, Climate Resilience, and Erosion Control Board. So just universally in this document, anticipating that they will approve our request for ordinance, it will become effective on November 11th, I believe, which should precede the issuance of this POCD. So that should just be a universal change in here. On page 85, talking about the Town of Fairfield Flood Mitigation Plan. Upper right-hand column about halfway down. It says the FECB developed the initial version of this plan and has been updating it as needed over the last 10 years. I would suggest to change the word updating to revisiting because we really haven't updated that plan. What we're working on currently will be the first update to that plan. And then at the end of that section, it says the plan is scheduled for update in 2024. Well, we've just received the responses to the request for proposal from consultants to help us develop that plan. And realistically, it will not be issued till 2025. And I would just suggest that we should wind up calling it the plan of 2025, which will be exactly 10 years from when we issued the initial plan. The last thing is on, I guess this is on action items under a resilient community. Item E5 says consider adopting a schedule of required updates to the town flood mitigation plan developed by the Flood and Erosion Control Board, i.e. every 5 years. I would suggest that we change that to every 10 years because you can appreciate the time it's taken to go through this POCD, and it has been 10 years since our last master plan, and the fact that these physical situations don't change all that quickly, that 10 years is a more reasonable increment to having that upgrade. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I was not gonna say anything. I'm sure you guys heard a lot, but I couldn't help it. My name is Mark Andre. I live at 1468 Burr Street. I've been a town resident for about 25 years now. I'm gonna keep my story a little short. About 25 years ago, my wife and I were looking for a little place to start our family. From Greenwich, I work, Ridgefield, Darien, all these other places. Fairfield was a place where we could find a little house where we can start our family. With $52,000 a year, a young family 25 years ago could buy a home in town. That doesn't exist anymore. Doesn't matter where we land, as far as affordable housing, development, there's a shortage of housing. A lot of folks like us 25 years ago today still making the same amount of money cannot live in this town. So you guys' job is to provide policies that can encourage, you're not gonna build a lot of housing to solve the housing crisis. It's not gonna happen. The town is not gonna do it. But I would say something very simple. What I would encourage you guys to do, as a town resident, who's now an empty nester, who benefited from public school, all the investment folks like Clarissa made, some of my other neighbors who talk about our development, invested in this town, is to provide a pathway to encourage, we can grow the grand list, provide opportunities for folks to move in, provide opportunities for the private sector to help you build the housing, the affordable housing that you need. Few months from now, probably, we're gonna get our moratorium. That's what's gonna happen 4 years from now, or 5 years from now. We're gonna go back to the same thing again. So I will encourage you, instead of increasing the inclusionary percentage rate from 10 to 12%, to increase it maybe to 15%. Currently, the town of Westwood has 20%. Someone mentioned the town of Darien. I recently got an apartment project in the town of Darien where the minimum requirement is 14%. They require 12% if you're doing a subdivision with 5 homes. Here we have 9. The other thing I would say, me personally as an architect, I've experienced doing project in town where I've worked for some developers who use 830G as a tool to get around the zoning regulation. Some of you argue that, that's probably true. But I would say what pained me the most, the few projects that got approved, they didn't get built. I'm not a housing advocate, but I do care about affordable housing. I do care about housing option. As an empty nester, I would like to stay here. And I'm afraid when I'm down my luck, I'm not gonna be able to find an apartment to stay here. I'm not gonna be able to afford a home in this place. I would suggest a way to get around 830G, whether me as a developer wants to use it or not, is to encourage partnership with the private sector through our regulation, through a streamlined process that can minimize timing, legal expenses, that provide developers incentive to build more affordable housing. And it's not just affordable housing. I would call it diversity of housing. Where folks like me, 10 years from now, I'll be in my 60s. Where am I gonna live? Nobody's building for me. Some folks talk about, you know, what this town used to look like. About 20 years ago, you could buy a home for 300 grand. The regulation changed housing, the houses that I've designed for the past 20 years, the least expensive one that I've designed and got sold was $900,000. In the beach area, before it was the beach area, all of you knows what this area used to look like. Well, it cost several $1 million to buy a home in the beach area. Folks who sold their home that they purchased for a couple grand, who sold them for $600,000 or $1 million, those folks are not staying here because we're not building for them. That's the policy I would like to see you guys push in certain ways that encourage not only developers building in our downtown, but building homes for our young kids who graduate college, maybe they can return. For the older folks, soon to be myself, who may end up with some residual income, we can stay in this community. And I think, lastly, as an architect, well, I design a lot of homes, I design apartments. You can codify what you want in that regulation. But I haven't seen any town and cities that try to codify a certain style for anything. The last one that I've seen was actually, I think it was last year. Congress tried to implement a certain style for public building. It didn't pass, failed. I'm not sure how you would instruct anyone to design a certain style doing commercial buildings. You can, but you would have to put, you know, codify in very detailed so everybody knows what they're doing. And I'm not sure that's gonna stop any neighborhood opposition regardless. If you want the town to be uniform, designers, architects, we all can design things that fit. But you have to provide clarity. Asking someone to design a 2-story building in a 4-story zone because there's a single-story building next to it, not quite fair. You certainly can do it, but if I buy my house next to an empty commercial lot, should I assume there's always gonna be an empty lot there, or someone never gonna build a 4-story apartment? You don't have to. The market, these are market-driven decisions. I think I'll stop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The remainders have already spoken.
To check the,
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if you could please check online to see if there's anybody.
There's a few. I mean, you might want to just call for anybody who's,
If there's anybody joining us remotely or by phone that wishes to be heard, either sign up in the chat so we can call, or if you can just unmute yourself and identify yourself, please. Anybody joining us remotely or by phone that wishes to be heard?
nope, nobody said anything.
Anybody joining us remotely or by phone wish to be heard on the POCD? I'll just say, I guess, to everybody present and for the record, that we will still be accepting comments from anybody who spoke or everybody who hasn't spoken. This would be, but wishes to submit anything. You can submit it to our office. It's at TPZ Commission at Fairfield CT.org. Reach out to our staff for any clarification or for help.
I just have a couple follow-up remarks if I may, Mr. Chairman. I don't wish to rebut anybody in particular, but there were a couple of questions that came up that I know, unfortunately, many of the speakers that spoke have left, but I want to thank everybody for their participation. What makes this the incredible town that it is the level of public engagement that we get at these types of events. So thank you for those of you who stayed and for those of you that have left and provided comment. Thank you. Again, I'm not looking to rebut anybody in particular, but there was a question about ADUs versus a 2-family house. The distinction is we require owner occupancy of an ADU. And that leads me to, well, obviously we don't have a big crowd here anymore, but if anybody that may look at this or viewing at home, there is an ADU workshop scheduled for Thursday night of this week at the History Museum. So folks who have questions about ADUs can avail themselves of that opportunity.
7 p.m.
We heard a lot about housing. I just want to emphasize a couple things. The design residence district regulations, we didn't get into detail of each of the specific recommendations in the housing section, but that's one that could potentially reintroduce the types of dwellings that we heard from our first speaker, Mr. Camaro, this evening. That spreadsheet of multifamily housing that I referred to in my remarks, talking about tracking school kids, our regulations wouldn't permit those developments to happen today. Those are some of the most popular places to live now. And we're hearing more and more demand for downsizing seniors in the array of housing that we heard about tonight. The places like Mosswood Condominiums, Southport Village, or Southport Woods, the litany, I could put that spreadsheet up again, but the reality is the regulations were changed in the late 80s because there was a push at that time to reduce the number of condo type developments, multifamily developments. One of the suggestions were that this plan incorporates is potentially revisiting that because I think 30 years now removed, I think people are ready to have that type of option. That it's a little bit more density than you can do under the current regulations, but less density than you would get in a typical affordable housing application. So that's one of the regulation amendments considered. The other thing, there was a speaker that questioned the footprint of commercial and the growth of that. Our footprint of commercially zoned land in town is 5% of our total land mass. We are not looking to increase that. As a matter of fact, the changes that are proposed in this plan are targeting a very small percentage of the town. Yes, it's a lengthy list. There's a lot of things for this commission to consider, but at the end of the day, it doesn't impact a very large landmass. I respect the concerns that folks raised about the potential expansion of the center design district. Obviously, more discussion need be had with this commission with respect to that. But I want to just go back and end where I started, in that adoption of a POCD does not implement any of its recommendations by itself. There needs to be implementation steps that happen thereafter. Adoption of the POCD is not the end of the story. It's not, okay, we've done our job, we're done. It's the beginning. We identify additional planning work that we are recommending happen in the near term, but we cannot undertake all of that planning work in the scope of this document. Those are next steps that we are laying out in this plan to consider in the near term. We cannot go another year, 2 years, however many years it may take to do that before we implement this plan. So that's just the thought I want to emphasize and leave you with. I thank those of you still here, those of you that have gone home to do other things for your input is very valuable in this process. And we thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Just again, last call. Is anybody joining us remotely by phone that wishes to be heard? Hearing none, let's just adjourn the meeting tonight, leave the comments open for people to submit, and then just for the commission to regroup and see what we want to do next. Okay. Have a good night, everyone.